video, I'm going to share with you how to control your mind in order to control your reality. To fully understand this, we're going to begin with a model of how our minds work, why we're experiencing the reality that we're experiencing, and how both your conscious and your subconscious mind work together to influence the reality that you're experiencing this very minute. This video is going to go into extreme depth into three main mechanisms that govern your mind and ultimately dictate your reality. And throughout this video, I'll also be sharing with you actionable tools that you can begin to implement right now to see results right before your very eyes. So without further delay, let's go right ahead and get started. We live in an age where your attention is the most valuable resource. It's no wonder that these big companies are fighting tooth and nail to capture it. I was recently reading an article about how TikTok is used differently in China versus the rest of the world, and how TikTok is actually used to positively influence children in China whilst readily promoting the unhealthier version to the rest of the world to get children hooked. This addiction to social media is draining our dopamine reserves, making us paranoid, robbing us of our attention. And as you probably already know, wherever your attention goes, energy inevitably flows in that direction. So it's imperative now more than ever before that you guard your attention with all your life. So let's get started with mechanism number one via which we get programmed. And this explains our subconscious process and why we've been reacting a certain way, why we've been responding a certain way, and why we've been experiencing the same cycle in our lives that we've been experiencing. This is the key that you must understand in order to fully break out of your habitual way of being and feeling and thinking. So mechanism one is the stimulus response cycle. So let's gain a deeper understanding of how this works. Initially, we're presented with a stimulus. So in this case, let's say you're up one morning at 4 or 5 a.m. or maybe even 6 a.m. Maybe you wake up late. But you hear birds chirping outside your window. Now, when you hear birds chirping, immediately your brain cognizes it. There is cognition. This simply means you cognize that this is a sound, not sight, right? So sound, and then your brain begins to recognize it based on the past, based on past experience. Recognize. This essentially means you recognize that this is a bird chirping, not a dog barking. And now something interesting happens. You now react to this and you express acceptance or resistance. Oh no, I don't like this. This is annoying. This has just woken me up, right? So in this manner, our reaction determines this whole cycle and how it begins. And if we keep reacting the same way that we have been to every single stimulus being presented to us, we will keep experiencing the same results in our lives. So something important can happen here. Up to this point, up until the recognition process, everything is subconscious, kind of like your heart beating. You don't have to tell your heart to beat, it just naturally beats, right? So this whole process is subconscious. It simply happens without your interference. However, this process, the process that can determine the rest of your life's trajectory, this can become conscious. Unfortunately, up until this point, most people have been unconscious about how they've been reacting to things. So from this moment forward, instead of reacting, what we will do is respond. So in the instance of the birds chirping in the morning, instead of expressing dissatisfaction, we can begin to express our awe at nature. Perhaps we've been woken up. Instead of even resisting our dissatisfaction, we can accept that there was a waking up. Instead of ruminating about how the rest of our days are gonna suck because I'm tired, because I just woke up early, we can just accept it and deal with it. In this manner, we slowly begin to change the programming in our subconscious mind. And as a result, as you'll learn through mechanism 2, when I'm going to discuss it, you'll see how just learning to interrupt this pattern at this stage and just simply learning to respond will make dramatic shifts in your life, okay? So in understanding this, this may all be great, but it's much easier said than done. So we need a tool to allow us to wake up at this phase so that we don't react. We don't immediately go into a habitual way of reacting to it. Okay, so, any stimulus that's presented to you, maybe you hear that the inflation rates are rising, maybe you see in society or something with the government or, something that you don't like and you've been habitually reacting to it in a way that you don't want, right? How do we change that pattern? This all comes down to learning how to center your attention. I'm super excited to share this with you. So let's learn how to center our attention so we can gain back control and learn how to consciously respond to the different stimuluses that come in our lives. So I was actually reading this book recently. It's called Mind Control by Jose Silva. And it reminded me of something that I learned a long time ago. But something interesting that I discovered was your brain actually functions in 5 different brainwave states, okay? And the 5 different levels of function are gamma, which is, I believe, the highest level of brainwave, the highest frequency of brainwave. So in this state, you're more focused on intense concentration and you can pretty much focus harder, okay? The next stage, which is our normal, everyday, regular consciousness, is the beta brain state. This is where everyone is functioning at. A level below that is the alpha brain state. Okay, this is more when you're relaxed. A little below that is the theta brain state. This is more light sleep, rapid eye movement, and a level even below that, your brain waves are just almost like the frequency is so low, it's unrecognizable. It's the delta brain state. This is more like deep sleep. Our goal here is to simply switch from beta to alpha. If you can do this to program your mind with whatever it is that you want to program it with, and as a result, experience what you want in your reality, okay? So the whole purpose of the centering attention exercise is to get you more and more into the alpha brain state and just learn how to function in this state in your daily living. For most of you who are doing this exercise for the first time, you're going to experience an overwhelming sense of calm and peace. And it'll be quite different to what you've been experiencing in daily living. But for some of you, this will be quite normal. For regular meditators, you won't feel a difference because you've been functioning in this brain state and you're very accustomed to functioning in this brain state. So let's get straight to the exercise. So this exercise has 2 simple steps. Step number 1, every single hour, whenever the clock hits 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, the zeros, what I want you to do is set an alarm on your phone or a gentle reminder somewhere, okay? We just want to do this once every hour. We want a reminder once every hour. To get started off, this is quite sufficient. And we're going to call this waking up. Every hour we're waking up from whatever it is we were so immersed in, okay? Wake up every hour. Now, what we want to do is observe our breathing for 1 minute. Simple. What you do is you set a timer for 1 minute, you sit in a very comfortable, relaxed space with your spine straight and erect, and you just simply observe your in-breath and your out-breath. Normal breathing pattern. Don't try to change your breathing pattern. Just observe the natural breathing pattern that's already there. Very, very important, okay? Once you do this for a minute, you'll notice that the functioning of your brain waves has changed. Everything's slowing down a little bit. You can even slow down your breath without, forcing it, without making it feel unnatural. As you do that, your brain waves literally start to change. And as you center yourself, you're better able to respond. You're better able to become a more conscious human being, okay? So observe breath for 1 minute. So if you do this with me right now, simply stay there and observe your breathing. In, out. You can feel the
Neville Goddard, The Secret of God, read by Josiah Brandt. Tonight's subject is the secret of imagining. That is really the secret of God. For God is man and exists in us and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. So, when we speak of the secret of imagining, we are speaking of the secret of God. So, I will use the terms tonight in the order in which they are described in Scripture. The secret of imagining is the greatest of all problems, to the solution of which everyone should aspire. Now, these are the terms that Paul uses in his description of Christ in his first letter to the Corinthians. Supreme power, supreme wisdom, supreme delight lies in the solution of this mystery. For Paul describes Christ as the power of God and the wisdom of God. And the book of Proverbs describes Christ, called the Messiah there, as the delight of God. So, here the supreme power is the discovery of the great mystery of imagining. So, tonight, I hope I can add some light to this wonderful mystery. Because, if you find it, you have found the secret of God's creative activity. We are told of so many writers having experienced it. Take our late president, Herbert Hoover. He said, human history, in its many forms of government, its revolutions, its wars, and in fact, the rise and fall of nations, could be written in terms of the rise and fall of ideas implanted in the minds of men. Now, here is a man speaking who sat in our highest office in this world. If you could only control the imaginations of men, well, who could control it when that is God himself? You are free to imagine anything in this world, and no power in the world can stop it if you persist in that imaginal activity. But we are not disciplined. We are diverted. Propaganda controls the motions of our imaginal activity. You read the morning paper, you turn on the radio, you turn on the TV, and you are diverted. If you could only imagine the state desired, go to the very end, and dwell in the end as though it were true, and remain faithful to the end, in a way that no one knows, it would objectify itself in your world. For objective reality is solely produced through imagining. That is God himself. So, when I speak of imagining, I am speaking of the creative power of God. I am speaking of Christ. That is the creative power of God. That is the wisdom of God. That is the delight of God. Man, not knowing that, he thinks in terms of a person, not knowing that he himself is the person in whom God dwells. And he has to discover God within himself. When he discovers God within himself, he is still a person, but he discovers God as his own wonderful human imagination. That is God. And he discovers, if he observes what he is doing, that all of his imaginal activities do eventually become objective fact. But man's memory is so faulty, he can't quite relate his own imaginal activities to the harvest that he sees in his world, which he is compelled to reap. Here is a very so-called wise man, wise in the use of the English tongue. His books are almost in all of the universities of the world. I know they're in almost all the English libraries of the world. He's gone from this world now. I knew him quite well. He was a sheer delight as a dinner companion. He changed his opinion in later years, yes, But back in the 30s, when he wrote Ends and Means, this is what he said. And this is all an assumption. He said, I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning. Consequently, I assumed that it had none, and was able, without any difficulty.
You can only attract to you what vibrates in harmony with you. So if we see
towards our soul, how do you keep a sustained level of enthusiasm in this journey that actually requires quite a lot of profound internal work?
I think you said the right word there, in enthusiasm. I think people are looking for excitement.
Yeah, very well said.
And there's quite a big difference.
Absolutely.
I've always pointed out, when you see a person that gets excited when something good happens, you're going to see somebody who gets depressed when something bad happens. And there's a great lesson in that. But rather than getting excited, we should get enthused. We want to look where enthusiasm comes from. It comes from in theos, which is in spirit. And everything just is. And if we can look at it, it just is. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. We're not going to get excited. We'll get enthused. And if we look at the negative, it just is. It's not going to depress us because it just is. So I think the trick there is to understand the difference between enthusiasm and excitement. And how do you maintain the enthusiasm? I think the only way to maintain it is to continually study who you are. Never stop studying. And now, I don't think you just sit and study, do nothing else. You have to study, understand, and you have to apply it. So it all comes out in results. Now, I have found a great way to measure results is in money. You can measure it to the penny. People say happiness or health. You can't measure a person's happiness, and you cannot measure their health. You can go and you can have a checkup, and they'll say, guy's in perfect health. He walks out of the doctor's office, a bang, he drops dead. He wasn't in perfect health at all. It appeared he was. But in earning money, you provide service. But you got to control the money. You don't let the money control you. And then if you fall in love with the idea of providing service, and it's in a profit-making way, you can earn a lot of money. Well, then you can put that money to work to do great things with. And that's sort of the path I'm on. And like my partner and I, we build schools over in Africa. And we do them through Cynthia Kersey out there in Los Angeles. She's the Unstoppable Foundation. And we take a lot of joy in that. We have people from the company go over and see the work that we're doing, that they're contributing to. So I think you've got to keep checking your results, and you have to keep raising your own level of awareness. And the only way to do that is to continually study. But control your life. Don't let life control you. So you're living from the inside out, which sounds very esoteric or philosophical, but it's the only way I can explain it, because that's really what you're doing.
See, when you talk about money, Bob, I feel aligned with that too. The idea of, I grew up in a mindset of where I often thought that, money was the root of all evil, or that money meant someone had to do something negative to get it, or you always had just enough to survive. And I find that we still see that paradigm existing in society. But see, when you talk about money, and even when I learned with the monks, where we really understood the value of money, you see it as an energy source of service. You see
exactly
it as
what it is.
Yeah, exactly. You see it as an energy source of service, of helping, of giving, of providing. Tell us about that mental shift that's made, because I feel that you're obviously a teacher in the law of attraction and popularized and shared that concept. How about what are some of the myths with the law of attraction when it comes to money? Because I find that there are a lot of misuses or misapplications of the law of attraction when it comes to money.
Oh, listen, when it comes to law of attraction, it's almost synonymous with ignorance. Hardly anybody understands the law of attraction. The secret, of course, really blew up the law of attraction in a big way, caused a lot of people to think about it, but we didn't explain it properly on that movie, didn't get into it in depth. And most people don't know how to get into it in depth. Attraction it's a secondary law. It isn't a primary law. The primary law is the law of vibration. And the law of vibration decrees that everything moves, nothing rests. We live in an ocean of motion. Circulation being one of the first laws in the universe. When circulation stops, death sets in. Well, we operate on a frequency. You do, I do. And what we're really attempting to do is raise the frequency that we're operating on. We want to operate on a higher frequency all the time, because that's where the real beauty of life is. Well, this thing we're living in is a molecular structure in a very high speed of vibration. And the brain is an electronic switching station that alters the vibration we're in. Well, we operate on a frequency, and the only thing we can attract to us is that which is in resonance with us. So the reaction is actually attraction. It's like Emerson said, the law of cause and effect was the law of laws. Action, reaction is the law of cause and effect. Well, our thoughts, feelings, and actions we send off into the universe. It's a vibration. The universe sends it back. It responds in like manner. Well, the response of the universe is the attraction. You can only attract to you what vibrates in harmony with you. So if we see things coming into our life that we don't like, let's understand what we don't like is in harmony with something inside. So we better try and understand what it was or what it is, and then get rid of it. Attraction's a secondary law, and we've got to understand it is very real, and you only attract to you what you're in harmony with. When you want something that's on a higher frequency, you've got to operate on that higher frequency, because all the thoughts and things that you require are on that higher frequency. Most people, I say, are living on an AM frequency trying to listen to FM music. It doesn't work.
How do you know what vibration or frequency level you're operating at? Because people often judge their performance by their productivity, by their efficiency. We're not trained, as you said, with your paradigm, again, going back to that, we're not trained to observe our frequency and vibration, and people are not sure. So if someone's listening and watching us today, how do they know what their vibration or their frequency is? How do they diagnose that?
Well, I think the only way to do it is by the results you're getting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It'll tell you.
Right. Makes sense.
See, the results do tell the truth. They don't lie. Spirit manifests through its polar opposite, always. We're spiritual beings. Spirit flows to and through us and will do anything for us. Whatever we ask, it'll give us. And we're asking in thought. So what we want to do is take a look. What have I been thinking? Take a look at your results. You'll know what you're thinking. That's how you can tell the frequency you're on. You want to start frequencies, vibrations, feeling. When you say, I feel bad, what you're really saying is, I'm not in a very good vibration. You say, I feel particularly good. You're saying, I'm in a pretty good vibration. Conscious awareness of vibration is referred to as feeling.
Mm.
So I think the way to really understand the frequency and the vibrations you're operating on is by the results you're getting.
Yeah.
And if you're continually having problems in all areas of your life, you're on the wrong vibration, very low level of vibration. And we can change it. Now, I teach that in the seminars. I have ways of illustrating it and everything. And it's important. And as people get into it, they really like it. See, I think when you hear the truth, you'll know it. And I came across, I don't know, it came to me, I guess, I was searching for a way how to explain that. When you hear the truth, you'll know it. Well, There's music in this room right now. There's music in your room. You may not hear it, but we know it's here. It's being broadcast and it's in the room. And we don't hear it because our ears are not operating on the frequency the music is being broadcast on. But if we turned on a radio, the radio picks up on that frequency, speeds it up, zippo, way up onto a higher frequency, and we can hear it. Well, it's the receiver on the radio that picks it up, sends it up on a higher level where you hear it. When you hear the truth resonates with the essence of who you are. And when it resonates, it sets up that vibration. It comes out on the conscious level as knowing. You just know. You just know that's right.
Yeah.
When you hear the truth, you'll know. I know it. That's true. Well, that's true when you're reading something. When a person says something to you, you hear it and you just, I know that's not true. I know that is true. It resonates with the essence of there is perfection. Our spiritual DNA is perfect. And when we hear the truth, it's like that's the receiver and it clicks in, you know.
Yeah.
We're pretty fascinating expressions of life, you and I and everybody else. I mean, the beautiful part is, like, I've studied this like a scientist, probably more serious as the time goes on, but for 60 years, starting on the 21st of this past October, this is my 60th year, and I study this every day. I mean, I'm obsessed with this. And at one time that bothered me, but doesn't anymore. And so I just don't stop studying it, and it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Bring that other thing up. It said it bothered me. I used to think you hear things and you think they're positive, they're negative. I hear obsession. I thought that was negative. Somebody told me I was obsessed with something, or I thought I was obsessed. But then I got a hold of Lloyd C. Douglas's book, The Magnificent Obsession. And I thought, how could it be negative if it's magnificent? You know?
Yeah.
So I got the dictionary out and I looked the word up. I don't know why I hadn't done it before that. And it says an obsession is the persistent, disturbing preoccupation with an often unreasonable idea. It's a magnificent definition. And I'm obsessed with a beautiful concept.
Mm.
Who am I? That's the obsession, you know?
Yeah, it's a great obsession. It's the beginning of all knowledge, right? It's the seed of all knowledge. Like everything starts from that.
It's true.
Everything starts from that question.
Yeah.
And it's the beginning of all knowledge and seeking of true knowledge. I loved what you said about the truth always resonating. Tell us a bit about, Bob, around the applying the law of attraction to love in our lives, because I find that one of the biggest paradigm blocks that a lot of us have, and I know a lot of my listeners feel challenged with, is the finding of love, the keeping of love, the growing of love in a relationship with another person. It can be one of the biggest challenges. As you said, our spiritual DNA is perfect, but our material experiences in DNA comes with baggage and pain and stress, and we end up attracting or vibrating at a level where we attract something that actually is what we need at the time, but isn't what we really truly want. Tell me a bit about your experience in that area, in your field or study in that area.
I think that love is resonance. When two people are in love, they're on the same frequency intellectually, emotionally, and physically.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that get married are not in love. They're in habit. Or that stay married are not in love. When two people are in love, they enjoy thinking about the same ideas. Conscious mind deals with ideas. They get emotionally involved with the same ideas, so they're setting up the same vibrations. Their heart is on the same frequency. And physically, they enjoy doing the same things. They have a great physical connection. That's when two people are in love. They're in harmony intellectually, emotionally, and physically. You can fall in love with your business. I'm in love with the business that I'm in. Intellectually, emotionally, and physically, I'm in it right up to here, you know. So that's where I see love comes in. I don't think most people that are married are in love. I think they see each other and he thinks, God, she looks pretty good. And she thinks he looks pretty good. And they go to bed and they go to heaven for 15 minutes and they say, we're in love. Well, they were actually having some fun, but they weren't in love. But they thought they were, and so they get married, and they have nothing in common, really. And some of them will give the marriage a quiet funeral and get on with life, and others will just stay there and live like that, but there isn't any love. There may be respect and things like that. But I see love as when it's harmony, it's resonance. You can love a person, you can love an idea, you can love a vocation, you can love a place, you know. It's like Paul the Apostle, he said the greatest thing is love, and he's so right. Well, that's when you're in harmony with everything in all aspects of your life. It's pretty well the way I'm living. Now, it's taken me 87 years to get here, but, you know, but life's pretty good.
Yeah, I can tell. I feel it from the way you speak. It's definitely there, which is beautiful. Where does anyone who's listening to us today, Bob, will definitely feel inspired and moved? What would you want someone to do straight after they stop listening to this episode, as they go back into their own life after listening to you today? What do you want them to do? Who do you want them to be? Where would you like them to start?
I'd like them to ask themselves, what do I really want in this life? What do I really want? And take a pen and write it down. What do I really want in this life? They might start out, what do I love doing? I think that's where you start your purpose in life, is what do you love? I'm living my purpose. See, your purpose is why you're alive, why you get out of bed in the morning. And some people never figure that out. They never even give it any thought, when it's probably the most important question a person can ask themselves. If you start out, what do I really love doing? That's a good place to start. Do you know, I had a doctor here, probably a couple of years ago now in Phoenix. He was in a seminar and he said, he was telling me he was thinking of quitting the medical profession. I said, why are you going to quit? Well, he said, you got to put in a lot more time to earn less money today. And I said, well, I've heard that. He said, the medical profession's all messed up. And I said, well, I've heard that too. I said, why did you become a doctor? Well, he said, I love it. I said, why would you want to quit? Well, he said, because you can't earn. I said, wait a minute. I said, if you're doing what you love, if you never earned a dime, you're spending your days doing what you love to do. That's the trick of life. I said, your problem is you think you earn money by going to work. You work to earn money. You don't work to earn money. The people who earn the most money don't work at all. You earn money by providing service, but you gain satisfaction from doing what you love. And there's two forms of income. One satisfaction, the other is money. It's a material thing. But I said, if you're not getting satisfaction from what you do, you should quit it. Because I said, that's where it comes in. That's why we should figure out what we love to do and then dedicate our life to it. I got into this business. I had been studying it for quite a while. And I had the opportunity, I already mentioned, of visiting Earl Nightingale in 1966. And I was leaving his office right at the end. And I said, Earl, what is the big deal in life? Well, he said, there isn't any big deal, Bob. He said, it's simply a matter of sitting and figuring out what you love to do and then dedicate your life to it. So the problem with most people is they never figure out what they love to do. Well, I'm telling you, I could feel the hair going up in the back of my neck. I knew exactly what I'd love to do. I would love to do what he was doing, and I wanted to do it with him. I had a very busy company at the time. We were operating in Canada, the US, and England. But I knew that I was finished doing that. I was going to come back. I was going to work with him. 2 years later, I was his vice president of sales. I wanted to do what he was doing, be in the business he was in. And that's where I made the decision. And I love it. I love what I do. Now, that's what people should be doing. What do I love to do? Then dedicate your life to it. Now, you earn money by providing service. You can earn money while you're sleeping. Just figure out how to serve people. You don't have to be there. You don't have to physically be there and do it. You can serve people while you're sleeping and get paid. And that's how you earn money. So you got to learn how to earn money. But that has got nothing to do with a life of living what you love. That's the first place. So if I was telling anybody, sit down, figure out what you love to do, and then make up your mind you're going to dedicate your life to it. What stops most people, what they love to do, they think you can't earn any money at it. That doesn't matter. Forget about the money. That's another subject. Figure out how to earn it. Go talk to people who know how to earn money. I know how to earn money. I can teach people how to earn money. But that is not the thing. It's to provide service. So the most important thing, what do I love to do? Sit down. What would I really love to do? How would I love to spend my life? That's what we should do. And unfortunately, most people never get involved in that exercise.
What is the first thing you do in the morning to start your day? What is it that you do that you feel starts your day? Because I feel that a lot of the times what I'm noticing, especially now in the culture we live in, whether it's reaching for our phone, whether it's looking at the news, we're starting our day with energy that's already putting us in the wrong direction or pushing us in the wrong direction. What are you doing? What are you encouraging people to do first thing in the morning to start with this understanding that we are awareness, to start with this understanding that negative feelings need to be embraced?
It's so amazing because the first thing I do now is I lay in bed and as awareness. So I be awareness. And I just lay there for a particular amount of time, just feeling the joy and the freedom of the eternal being that we are, and just lay in awareness. And so that's what I do absolutely every single morning. And what's extraordinary now, I mean, at the beginning, it was like I felt like I had to remember to do that, but that doesn't even kind of make sense. But I that's what I felt. I felt like I had to remember to do it. And now, at the moment I open my eyes, is just awareness just fills the room, and the joy just fills the room. And so I lay in that. Prior to that, I would wake up every day in gratitude. Yeah. Prior to that was gratitude was, and you know, Jay, even now, if life gets a bit bumpy or something happens, just something not really negative, but just something where everything isn't flowing, then I will just look at gratitude and through awareness, just be so grateful for the fact that we are this infinite being and that no one dies. I'm so grateful to be aware of this and to know this. It's quite, you know, that's also quite humbling that somehow or another in this lifetime is that I had this awakening and realization of this. And because as you say, I agree with you 100%. There is nothing greater than knowing who you are. There's nothing. There will never be anything greater than that. 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, nothing will be greater than knowing who you are and being who you are. And it's just step by step, little step by step. And now's a really good time because the ego is being challenged. The mind is being challenged. It's being hit on all sides with the disharmony and the disruption on the planet. And so now is the best time ever to.
I think that the divine lives in. We all came from oneness, source. We came from singularity. We came from pure love, where there's no separation. Everybody in this room has done something great. And all they did was they They decided on what that future was they wanted to live by, and they made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that choice carried a level of energy that caused their body to respond to their mind. We gotta go from philosopher to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from thinking to doing to being, to learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, knowing it by heart, to believe, to behave, to become so conscious of your unconscious self, to know thyself so well that you don't default back to that old personality that's a set of hardwired thoughts and attitudes and beliefs. Nothing changes in our life until we change. And the only way we're going to change this world is we got to change us. People have to change. And when enough people change, I think that's the moment that who we are as a species of human beings begins to awaken. I have heard there for the longest time that there's a coming of a new consciousness, and I really believe it's not one person. I think it's a collective network, it's a collective consciousness, and there's a stigma in the world that if you leave with too much passion, you get it in the end. Every charismatic leader paid the price, but if everybody's leaving, you just can't take out everybody now, can you?
My name is Anna Dugwang. I am the host of the Know Thyself podcast. One of the many things I do. Amount of individuals in this room that are on the path, right? We're all on the path, but being somebody that's made the decision to call forth their own awakening, to actively be a participant in that process, largely who we are and how we act is a habitual construct. This notion of self that we build up to who we take ourselves to be in the world, and a lot of your work is helping people break free of the chains that we've subconsciously placed on ourselves. And so in the pursuit of having more access to ourselves, in the pursuit of finding true freedom within, I would love for you to share the mission that you're on and how people can break past the memory of who they've been so they can tap into the potential of who they can be.
All right. Well, a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body actually knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. It's a habit. So people wake up in the morning and they run through the same routine every single day. And the routine is mapped out neurologically in their brain. If they have the thought of the coffee maker, they make the choice to go over there. They do the thing to make the coffee. They have the experience of drinking it, and they feel the emotion associated with it. That becomes a pattern. It becomes more automatic. It becomes second nature. So we have a series of these redundant patterns then, and in time, we lose our free will to a set of programs, and the body is programmed into the predictable future based on what we've done in the past. And that's how we lose the free will to a set of programs. So that habituation is the predictable future, and that's the known. And other people wake up in the morning and they romance their memories of the past. They think about the problems that they have in their lives, and those problems are connected to certain people and certain objects and certain things at certain times and places. And since the brain is a record of the past, the moment they remember that problem, they're thinking in the past. And every one of those problems has an emotion that's associated with it. So the moment the person feels unhappy, the moment the person feels fear, the moment the person feels unworthy, the moment the person feels sad, now the body's in the past. Because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body, and how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. And so it's that thought and that feeling, it's that image or that memory and the emotion, it's that stimulus and response that's conditioning the body to become the mind of that emotion. And now the body is so objective that it does not know the difference between the real life experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that that person is creating by thought alone. And the body's reliving the same past experience over and over again. And if we can't think greater than how we feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, then we're thinking in the past. And if we believe that our thoughts have anything to do with our destiny, then our future is going to look a lot like our past. So that familiar past also is the known. And so what we discovered is that if you could teach a person to, when their body's sitting in a meditation, as an example, and it's off schedule, it's used to feeling angry at 8 o'clock in the morning because it watches the news. The person experiences traffic every day. They get 11 o'clock, they check their emails, and they start judging other people. You know, there's a set of familiar emotions that person has been living by. We discovered that if a person can sit past that memory, that they can sit past that emotion that causes them to get aroused, to get frustrated, to get impatient, that's the emotion that causes the person to quit. And they have this conclusion that they can't meditate, or they can't focus, or they have ADD. It's a story they tell themselves about the past. We discovered, though, that when a person sits past those thoughts that say, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, I need a brain scan, there's something wrong with me, it's my mother's fault. And they're curious to see what's on the other side of that thought. When their body gets aroused and frustrated, instead of giving up and saying, I have too many things to do, that they actually learn a way to settle the body back down into the present moment. And it's David versus Goliath. And every time we can become conscious that we get emotional, we get frustrated, we get impatient, and we settle the body down, we're executing a will now that's greater than the program, and the body is no longer the mind. The person is now becoming conscious of their unconscious self, and it takes an enormous amount of energy. And it takes an enormous amount of awareness to stay present, because to stay present is to be in the unknown. That's when you can't predict the future, and that's not when you're remembering the past. And the unknown in the program that we have as biological creatures is a scary place. It's better to run from the unknown than to hang out in it. And yet when the person wants to quit and give up, and their body wants to get up and do something, and they catch themselves, that they do that and they bring their body back down into the present moment, that's a victory. And when the body gets frustrated and it's what wants to be the mind, and the person settles the body down, it's telling the body it's no longer the mind, that it's the mind. And that's taming the animal. That's taming the animal self. And the repetition of that over time causes the body to finally start to surrender into the present moment. And there's an enormous liberation of energy that takes place in the nervous system. And they're in the unknown, and nothing scary, nothing dangerous happens to them. And all of a sudden, they can be more present in their life. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. And when you're in the present moment, you have a lot of energy and a lot of awareness. It turns out the people who stretch themselves past that point are the people that have the most change. They're curious to see what's on the other side of what's familiar and known. And instead of, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, scrolling through TikTok, getting on the text, instead of thinking of 1,000 reasons that you're too busy to sit past that, or to say, today's not a good day to meditate. A person who's curious, who's uncompromising, that keeps doing that over and over again, all of a sudden starts to biologically change. Because if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, a person who's living by the same emotion every single day is signaling the same genes in the exact same way. And genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of the body. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. And that person now they're feeling certain feelings that are familiar to them, that are influencing the very same thoughts, and the very same thoughts make the very same chemicals for them to feel the exact same way. And it takes crisis, it takes trauma, and it takes disease, and it takes diagnosis, and it takes betrayal, and it takes loss for people to finally make up their mind to change. We discovered that if you keep thinking the same way, if you keep making the same choices, if you keep doing the same things, if you keep recreating the same experiences, and you keep feeling the same emotions, your biology is going to stay the same, because you're the same. There's nothing to that. But we discovered also, give people information, sound scientific information, and let science be the contemporary language of mysticism. Let science demystify the mystical and challenge the mind of an individual to combine quantum physics with neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and the mind-body connection and epigenetics. I say to our audiences, turn to someone next to you and say, I'm not afraid of the word epigenetics. You know, people get afraid of that word. Electromagnetism. We want to make it. All of those sciences point the finger at possibility. And if knowledge is power, then knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment. And it's not enough to just learn it. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. The application of that philosophical, theoretical information, we discovered that every time you learn something, you're making a lot of connections in your brain. 1 hour of focused concentration on one concept, one idea, doubles the number of connections in your brain if you're present with that information. There's physical evidence in your brain as a result of information in your environment. The brain is mapping information neurologically. If you don't repeat it, if you don't think about it, if you don't review it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So if learning is making synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining that information. And people have to think about it because it's so much easier to forget this information than to remember it. And they got to remind themselves and reproduce that same level of mind. So what we discovered is if you set up the conditions in the environment and you give people the proper instructions, if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, they can get their actions equal to their thoughts, if they get their mind and body working together, they should have a new experience. And the experience then causes jungles of neurons to be organized into more complex networks. That's what experience does. And we understood that the more the person can understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier, and they'll assign meaning to the act. And when they assign meaning to the act, they switch on the prefrontal cortex, the crowning achievement of the human being. And now the frontal lobe is all about business. It wants an outcome. And when that occurs and the person actually has the new experience, the end product of the experience is called a feeling or an emotion. The moment you feel unlimited, the moment you feel free, the moment you feel abundant, you are teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body, and we're embodying the truth of the information. The information is no longer in the brain. The information is actually in the body now. And that information from that experience actually selects and instructs new genes. And the person's changing their genetic destiny. If you've done it once, it must mean you should be able to do it again. And doing it over and over again, neurochemically, neurologically, and chemically, begins to condition the mind and body to begin to work as one. And when you've done it so many times that you no longer have to think about it, it's automatic, it's second nature, you've mastered that knowledge, you've become that knowledge. You're in a new state of being. It's innate in you. It's who you are. So to answer your question, we got to go from philosopher to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from thinking to doing to being, to learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, knowing it by heart, to believe, to behave, to become. And I can sit up here with you and I can tell you that in 7 days, if people go all in and they immerse themselves in the content, when they emerge at the end of 7 days, their biology has changed so much that it looks like they're living in a whole different life, a whole different environment. And they're making pharmacies of chemicals that work better than any drug, that we've actually mapped them, we've discovered them. It doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how young you are, doesn't matter how sick you are, doesn't matter how healthy you are, how rich, how poor, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. And when you get collective groups of people together doing it all at once, we discovered that people change people. And the only way we're going to change this world is we got to change us. People have to change. And when enough people change, I think that's the moment that who we are as a species of human beings begins to awaken. You know, the part of us that's kind and caring and loving and present and honorable and noble and empowered and giving and caring and healing. That's who human beings are when they're not living in stress and living in survival. Get a group of people doing that collectively, and I can tell you all kinds of crazy things not only go on in a person's biology, but in the energy of the room. And I want people to know that they're greater than they think, that they're more powerful than they know, that they're more unlimited than they could ever dream. And all I want to do is give people my greatest understanding of the truth, and then numerous opportunities to experience it. And sooner or later, they'll run into something really big. And they start believing in their future more than they've been believing in their past. And the side effect of that, then there's outcomes, miracles, that has changed my belief about possibility in the last 2 years. I'm not the same person because the people that are doing it look just like you. And they come from all over the world. And yeah, a lot of them had to go up against their own health conditions. And they stood on the stage at one point with stage 4 cancer, no evidence of stage 4 cancer. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, numerous times. That's the 4-minute mile. That's somebody breaking through a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness. And let me tell you, no drug, no radiation, no surgery, no diet was changing their condition. And they realized that nothing changes in our life until we change. And when you change, your life should change. So I want to give people the tools to actually experiment with it to see if it's the truth.
Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed. I gotta go. That's all the time we had for today.
Oh dear.
So good. So let's keep diving deeper here. I'm excited to go into the more esoteric, crazy stuff. But to elaborate where we're at right now, you're speaking to how who we are is largely a habitual construct. By midlife, you said that about 95% of us is on autopilot. It's continually doing the same habits and motions throughout our life. And with that in mind, it's almost like we're asleep. You could just say we're asleep. And so the process of waking up, I want to dive into now of how we can tangibly move through and go through very much like a drug withdrawal because
Rehab.
It's rehab because we have the biggest chemical factory within us, right? And so we have this inner hormone monster like continually pulling us back to our old conditioned self. And so in real time, how do you allow and how do you support and recommend people change from their habitual constructs of their memory?
All right, so let's just say then that in the midlife, your personality becomes pretty hardwired. If you keep thinking the same thoughts, if you keep making the same choices, you keep doing the same things, you keep creating the same experiences, you keep feeling the same emotions, I don't know, let's be conservative. You do that for 10 years. You would have to agree with me then that it would become more automatic, it would become more unconscious. So your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. That is it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way. Your personality is the same, and your personal reality will be the same as well. So if you wanted to change your life, if you wanted to change your personal reality, you would have to change your personality. And then you'd have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and decide if you really want to believe that any longer. And when does the story end? It's that moment that you become so conscious of that thought, you're so tired of it, you're so aware of it that you would never let it slip by your awareness ever again. You catch yourself complaining and blaming and making excuses and feeling sorry for yourself, and that's been your unconscious program. then the moment you become conscious of those unconscious behaviors, you're out of the program. You're only in the program when you're unconscious. And so it takes an enormous amount of energy and awareness to separate from those programs. And then there's those emotions that we feel every single day that are so familiar to us that we don't even know what they are. We just feel guilty. We don't even know it's guilt. It's just how we feel. And the stronger the emotions that we have to experiences in our life, the more altered we are inside of us. When the chemistry changes inside of us, the brain narrows the focus on the cause and takes a snapshot or a series of snapshots, and that's called a long-term memory. And so then it makes total sense then that a person, by every time they relive that event in their life, they're making the same chemistry in their brain and their body, and their body's literally believing it's living that experience over and over again. And now the body's so in the past that it's the mind of the past. So then the act of becoming so conscious that you don't go unconscious is a changing of consciousness. How many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That is the moment of change. And I looked up the word meditation. I looked it up. I wanted to know what that symbol meant, and it means to become familiar with, to become so conscious of your unconscious self, to know thyself so well that you don't default back to that old personality that's a set of hardwired thoughts and attitudes and beliefs, automatic habits and behaviors, and emotional responses that are equally as automatic. And the hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, I got news for you. Get ready, it's gonna feel uncomfortable. It's gonna feel unfamiliar. There's gonna be some uncertainty. There's gonna be some unpredictability. You're not complaining any longer. Your body's gonna go, well, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? You're just gonna stop today? We've manufactured all these chemicals so easily, and the body's gonna start craving those emotions. And it's going to signal the brain to do what? Think the same thought. Why? So it could make the same choice, so it can do the same thing, so it could create the same experience, so it could feel the same emotion. And the person says, this feels right to me. No. It feels familiar to you. So the 95% of the personality that is on automatic pilot, to know thyself, we discovered that you don't walk around pretending to forgive. That's not what it's about. Is you sit in the fire in the meditation and you keep working and selectively deciding what thought you do want to believe. And when it's the hardest, matters the most. If you were really, truly ambitious about your life, you would say before you got up in the morning, I'm going to remind myself of who I no longer want to be, how I'm not going to think, how I'm not going to act, how I'm not going to feel. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but let me just, when I step in that river of change, that biological, that neurological, that chemical, that hormonal genetic death of the self, let me help myself here. What thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And with attention and with intention. If a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over in your brain, you can begin to install neurological hardware in your brain. Keep doing it, and the hardware becomes a software program, and the side effect of that is that's a new voice in your head. No magic there. If you said, how am I going to be with my ex? How am I going to be with my coworker? How am I going to be with my kids? What would greatness look like today? What would love do today? And if you closed your eyes and you rehearsed a scene, the act of mental rehearsal, just imagining something, the brain, when it's present, doesn't know the difference between what the person is imagining and the real life experience. And the brain is changing to look like the event has occurred. Keep installing that hardware, and all of a sudden it'll become a software program. And you might actually start acting like a happy person. No magic there either. You primed the brain for that behavior. You installed it. This is the hard part for most people. Can you teach your body emotionally what the future will feel like before it happens. That means you're not waiting for your wealth to feel abundant. You're not waiting for your success to feel empowered. You're not waiting for your new relationship to feel love. You're not waiting for the mystical experience to feel awe. You're not waiting for your healing to feel gratitude. That's the old model of reality of cause and effect. Wait for something outside there to change, to take away this lack or separation or emptiness that I feel inside me. But if you begin to condition your body into the emotion of that future, and you could become familiar with that emotion because you could bring it up every day, and you could keep becoming more familiar with the way you're thinking, the way you're acting, and the way you're feeling. If you actually feel the emotions of your future before they happen, you'll never look for it. Why would you look for that future if it felt like it already happened? Get ready. I'm telling you, get ready, because weird things are going to happen in your life. The side effect of that is the synchronicity, the serendipity, the coincidence, the opportunity, the unusual event that causes you to do the and I'm not talking about a parking space either. I'm talking about a real life event where your world is rocked. And somehow you come to the awareness, the consciousness, the understanding that somehow you're creating this. And we move from being the victims of our lives to being the creator of our lives. And I want people to experience that, to prove to themselves how powerful they really are. And people have done all kinds of things as a result of it.
Mic drop after mic drop. So good. So again, the awareness is the first step, right? To be aware of what's actually happening within our reality. But then the key I want to highlight and emphasize that you spoke to is that you need to emotionally embrace the new future you want to step into. And that's the key to actually making the shift.
To causing the effect. In the quantum, well, let's get, you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Well,
In the quantum, you have to feel it to experience it. In three-dimensional reality, you wait for the experience, and the experience produces the feeling, and it takes away the lack or the emptiness of having it. And that's fine. That's how we navigate in three-dimensional reality. But when we truly create beyond the realm of space and time, if we create from the field instead of from matter, it's a different game. It's a whole different game. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can step down if you want. But let's just finish the thought of the personality and the personal reality here before we step into that. If you think differently, if you're acting differently, and if you're feeling differently, if you try that out as an experiment, and you said, look, I took time out of my life to actually do this, to change myself, I would like to know if it works. I'd love to get some feedback in my life. If you practice that on a regular basis, to become so familiar with yourself, so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't default, and if you can remind yourself who you do want to be in your life, and this is really about overcoming to become, if you think about it, who gets to be the beneficiary of your efforts? I mean, imagine if you're less angry and you're more happy, what would you think your friends would think? You're on a different medication. That's what they would think. They would think something's funny about you. You're not showing up as the memory that they have of you. So we teach that principle because when people do think differently, when they do make different choices, when they do different things, when they create different experiences and they feel different emotions, their biology really changes. Not a little bit, like a lot. Their brains change, their hearts change, their gene expression changes, thousands of metabolites in their blood change, their immune system gets stronger. All kinds of amazing things happen when people step into that river of change. I believe that if you're not being defined every day by a vision of the future, you'll be left with the memories of the past and you'll be predictable in your life. And to be defined by a vision of the future is actually selecting a new possibility that you would like to experience. And that possibility already exists in the quantum field. And in order for you to get creative, if you said, what would it be like to be happy? What would it be like to be healthy? What would it be like to be abundant? Whatever that is. The moment you ask those kind of open-ended frontal lobe questions, that forebrain switches on, and it's the workshop. It's the builder, it's the designer, it's the creator, it's the inventor. And really, it only has a certain amount of resources. It's got the circuits in the brain of things you've learned intellectually, philosophically, theoretically, and then it has networks of connections that have to do with experiences. And it looks out over the brain and says, let's see what he's got. I'll call up a little of this, a little of that, and he starts calling up different networks of neurons to answer the question what wealth or health or freedom would look like. And the moment those neurons fire in tandem, the person gets a picture in their mind, an image, and that's called intention. They're selecting a new possibility in the quantum field. For the passionate person who's truly lost in the creative process, they actually start to feel the emotion of that experience before it happens, and you've all done it. You make up your mind about something and your body feels it. No one's going to talk you out of it. Because once you feel it, you know that it's possible. And so then, the only way you can believe in that future is to feel the feeling of that future before it happens. Because the moment you default and you start feeling other feelings, I promise you, you're going to believe in your past. And you're going to come up with a really good story. And 50% of that story, according to neuroscience, isn't even true. People make up these miserable lives that they never even had, just to feel some emotion. So then, the person who's truly on the journey, who's going to break the addiction to those emotions, and they understand when they no longer feel those feelings, they're no longer signaling the same genes in the same way, they intellectually understand that, their body begins to change. And all of a sudden they say, my goodness, the pain that I had from my disease is better. I'm sleeping better through the night. I have more energy. They start noticing changes of that's the moment. The moment they notice what they're doing inside of them, that's starting to produce an effect outside of them, they're going to correlate what they're doing and they're going to keep doing it. And we've seen people heal from all kinds of health conditions. And I've asked them, where's the disease? Where'd it go? And they say, it belongs to the old person. I'm just not that person any longer. I'm somebody else. And like magic, their biology responds in wonderful and healthy ways. Now, people need to hear that. You need to hear that because that is the truth. That is the truth that there's a possibility for you to change you in some way that supports the vision of your future. But if you don't wake up every morning and be defined by it, it's easier to forget that future than to remember it. People who are truly on the journey and they're changing their personality, they're doing their meditations not to heal. They're doing their meditations to change. And they understand that when they change, the side effect of that is a change in their biology. They're not waiting for their healing to feel grateful. They understand that the gratitude is actually creating the healing. They're not waiting for their success to feel empowered. They're feeling empowered and they're walking towards their success. They're in love with life and they're in love with themselves and they create that in their lives. They're mystified by the mystery of life and they're having mystical experiences. And it's not like something that they have to try to do. It's the side effect of who they've become. And it's not the wealth. It's not the health. It's not the new relationship. It's who we become. And it's the overcoming process that is the becoming process. And making time for yourself out of your busy lives to spend a little bit of time defining who you want to be when you open your eyes is a service to the world in so many wonderful ways, because when everybody else is knee-jerking and you're present and compassionate, when everybody else is frustrated and angry, you're loving and kind. If you keep doing what feels unnatural, sooner or later you start becoming supernatural. And that's really what this is all about. It's to give people permission in their lives to be empowered by themselves. And if you don't wake up every morning and you don't do it, it means you don't believe it. and taking a little time to get yourself right. You've done this already. Everybody in this room has done something great. And all they did was they decided on what that future was they wanted to live by, and they made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that choice carried a level of energy that caused their body to respond to their mind. That the choice that they made in that moment to change, to live in that future, was a moment in time they would never forget. They could tell you where they were, the time of day it was, and the stronger the emotion they feel, the more they remember the choice. And they're remembering their future, long-term memory. That's the moment their healing began. That's the moment the body got a taste of the future. And they were doing it without a cell phone. They were doing it without a drug. They were doing it without a Netflix show. They were doing it on their own. People start doing that over and over again. Watch out. Start getting happy without you.
I look at the amount of reinforcement from the people that are familiar with the old selves as we start to change, that then they try to pull us back into who they have known us to be. At a deep fundamental level, how does our identification with the big three keep us stuck in that survival versus greater consciousness?
Wow. I love the question. Thank you. Every person, every object, everything, every place that you've ever been is mapped neurologically in your brain. Your brain is a reflection of the environment. It's an artifact of everything you've experienced in your life. If we're not defined by a vision of the future then, and we're left with the old circuitry of the past, it makes sense that the moment you open your eyes and your senses plug you into three-dimensional reality, the moment you see the same person, you see that person based on the memory you have of them. And that memory you have of them is associated with an emotion. And you see another person, and you go to another place, you do another thing. And now it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. It's your personal reality is actually creating your personality. Your environment is actually controlling, on some level, how you're thinking and how you're feeling by your senses giving you information based on the past. Come on, are you with me? Did you say no? Did I hear a no there? Every person, every object, everything, every place in your life is mapped neurologically in your brain. You meet somebody for the first time, you say, who are you? Oh, I'm this person, and I know these people. And I own these things, and I lived in these places at these different times. I lived in that place during that time. I know those people. Oh, well, hey, you know how that goes. So you have a neurological network for your boss. You have a neurological network for your partner. You have a neurological network for your cell phone, for your car, for everything that's known in your life. Everything that you know about in your life is mapped neurologically in your brain. So when people wake up in the morning and their senses plug them into three-dimensional reality, their environment is controlling the majority of the way they're thinking and feeling. In fact, they need the environment to feel something. And now we're at a point where there's a lot of things that are causing us to think a certain way. And so then the person has a good day. What do they say? I feel pretty good today. Had a good day. But when something goes wrong, when a person or circumstances change their state and now they feel bad, and you say to them, why do you feel this way? If they say to you, I feel this way because of that person or that circumstance or that condition, what they're really saying is that person, that problem, that circumstance is actually controlling my thoughts and controlling my feelings. And anything that's controlling our feelings or our thoughts or controlling us, we're victim to. Yes or no? Now, the stronger the emotion you have towards that person or the problem, the more you pay attention to it or to that person. And where you place your attention is where you place your... And you're giving your power away to that person. They're taking up your vital energy to change. And when a person is sitting in the fire, and their body's raging and they're trying to blame everybody, and that person is lowering the volume to that emotion, and they keep lowering the volume to that emotion, and the hardest part of every war is the last battle, and they lower the volume to that emotion. Finally, the body realizes it's no longer the mind, that the person is the mind, and there's that liberation of energy. The moment they overcome that emotion, they'll take their attention off that person or problem, and now they're calling energy back to them. And they're building their own electromagnetic field. There's energy to heal now. There's energy to create. There's energy for the mystical. And the side effect of that, getting out of those survival states, those emotions of survival, is the heart begins to open. And we've discovered the moment that heart starts feeling that energy, it is the creative center, and like taking a big blanket and going like this, it informs the brain right away. It's safe to create. It's safe to have a vision. When you get people really good at synchronizing their heart to their brain, they get super creative. In that state, we call relaxed and awake. Relaxed in the heart and awake in the brain is so much better than stressed out, unconscious, and living in a program. And it turns out you can teach people how to do that in 7 days.
Just give some grunts after each moment. So the big three, right? If we're under the identification.
Oh, let me finish that.
Go for it.
So then to change then, it would make sense then that you'd have to be greater than your environment. Yes or no? Yes. Because you can't respond in the same way, because if you do, you default back to the old person. Yes or no? So the change is to hold the vision in spite of environmental conditions, in spite of that state, and not fall from grace. And if the body's been conditioned to be the mind emotionally, and it's been habituated into a future, then it means the change is you have to overcome your body. And when the body gets aroused, when it wants to get up and do something and you settle it down, that's the process of change right there. That's the overcoming process. That's what it takes to arrive at your future. So if the body has drives and it's emotional and it's habituated, and you keep settling it down, I promise you, you're taming your pet. You stay right there. I'm going to feed you. I know you think you're going to die. I know you're super busy. I know you get migraines. I know you have food allergies. I know it's better for you to lay down. I know it's your mother's fault. Oh, no, it's your ex's fault. I know all that. You hang in there. Past all of those points, the body is trying to unseat you. It's doing what it can, and by causing it to fall back into the present moment, into the unknown, is how we overcome time. Because if you're not in the predictable future and you're not in the familiar past, those are the knowns. The present moment is the unknown, and that's where possibility exists. Teaching people how to get there and stay there is a habit. You can get better at it the more you do it.
Then, right, if we're under the assumption that who I am is this name in this body, I'm going to move in this time-space reality to protect my identity that I've created for myself. As you start to go from a somebody to a nobody to an everybody, which you speak to, then you start to tap into what is the unified field, and its nature starts to become your nature.
Whoa. Okay. So it makes sense then. Let's see if we can arrive there. It makes sense then that if you were truly going to really put all of your attention on you, to be aware of nothing but you would have to control all those thoughts that are connected to your body, to the people in your life, to the things you own, to the places you need to be, the place you live, the place you sleep, your schedule, the past. But we discovered that if we ask people to close their eyes, and now they're getting less sensory information to their brain, and we ask them to begin to take all of their attention off their body and go from a somebody to a nobody, to take all of their attention off all the people in their life and to go from a someone to a no one. That means you lay down the character. No attention on the objects and things in your life. You go from something to nothing. To take all of your attention off all the places you have to go and go from somewhere to nowhere and from some time to no time. You no longer are the character that you think you are in this three-dimensional reality. Your consciousness. Now imagine this. So let's make it really simple. Your senses plug you into reality, yes or no? Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
If I took away your sight, your hearing, your smell, your taste, feeling with your body, would you agree with me that you would have no experience of three-dimensional reality? Yes or no? But what would you be if you were still you? You would be aware. Yes or no? Aware of what? Nothing but you. And that is the perfect place where people begin to make really powerful changes. And we call that overcoming the self. Throw in the hormones of stress. And the stress hormones heighten our senses now and cause us to narrow our focus on the cause of the problem. And as the arousal of those chemicals cause the body and the brain to become alert, we focus primarily on the material world. And if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and you're living in this state of survival, and a state of stress, if T-Rex is chasing you, it would make sense you would be looking in your environment where to go. Yes or no? If you felt him breathing down the back of your neck, you would be thinking about your body, would you not? And if you were thinking about getting from here to the cave, you'd be thinking about how much time it's going to take you to get there. So stress hormones cause us to put all of our attention on our bodies, all of our attention on our environment, all of our attention on time. It's kind of funny because if to change means to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time, when we're under stress and we're in survival, it's really hard to change. In fact, it's not a time to change. It's a time to run, fight, and hide. And people spend up to 70% of their waking day living aroused by those stress hormones. So aroused that they become addicted to the rush of those chemicals, and they use the problems and the people in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. And they're becoming addicted to the life they don't even like. And those chemicals are powerful chemicals that change the brain and body dramatically. We move out of homeostasis, we move out of balance. The body's mobilizing all of its resources for whatever danger it's perceiving in the outer world. The problem is that you have one or two of those experiences and then you start expecting them to happen. When you're under stress, you're always preparing yourself for the worst case scenario in your mind. Prepare yourself for the worst. Anything less happens, you have a better chance of surviving. So people that all of a sudden start imagining the worst things that could happen to them in their life, and they embrace the emotion that's associated with it. And it's the thought and the feeling, it's the image, the emotion, it's the stimulus and response, and they're conditioning their body to become the mind of anxiety. And you keep doing it over and over again, the body will have a panic attack without you. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind, you programmed it subconsciously. And no planet that's 92 million miles away from here is causing you to be that way. I can tell you that. It's not cucumbers and it's not gluten either that's doing that to you. You're doing that to you. And so, in living in stress and living in survival, the stress response is created when we can't control something, when we can't predict something, when we have the perception that something's going to get worse. And all of a sudden, the arousal causes us to do what? Try to control, try to predict, try to make everything right. And so, in the aroused state, the brain is in very, very high frequency. And it's shifting its attention from one person to another object, to another thing, to another place. And every one of those different elements has a neurological network in the brain, and like a lightning storm in the brain starts firing out of order, starts firing really disintegrated, it's firing incoherently. And when waves are interfering incoherently, they lose energy. And we lose energy in the brain. And when we're under the gun of those chemicals, we narrow our focus, we over-focus, we obsess about something, and you have 10 really great things that happen in your life and one doesn't work, and you'll obsess about that one thing. In the state of readiness, in the state of survival, the brain is always trying to predict the next moment based on the past. There's no room for the unknown for a person in their life. And everything now, they have to see it, they have to smell it, they have to taste it, they have to feel it. Their senses are defining reality. And they're narrowing and narrowing their focus. And we just discovered that if we taught people to take their attention off of everything that's material, everything that's known in their life, and go from this kind of what we call a convergent focus or a narrow focus, to broaden their focus and open their awareness to nothing. Now, I don't know how to explain nothing to a materialist, but there's nothing there. And how big is emptiness or nothing? I don't know. But when people begin to broaden their focus and begin to sense space, the act of sensing, the act of feeling causes them to stop analyzing and thinking. And if they stop analyzing and stop thinking, they no longer activate those circuits in their brain that keep them in that state. And the brain starts to unify. It starts to synchronize. It starts to fire more coherently. It starts to organize in really healthy patterns. And what syncs in the brain actually links in the brain. And so when we have people open their awareness to space, and they pay more attention to it and less attention to them, they stay more aware of it and less aware of them, that they can lose their sense of identity, their sense of self to nothing. Their brain waves beautifully change in really, really wonderful ways, and the whole entire brain is now a symphony. And some people can get so good at this that they could actually let their body move into a light sleep. And it's resting in a light sleep while they're awake and conscious. And the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information. But now they're sitting there with their eyes closed. They're not getting any information from the environment. They're in a meditation. There's only one other place information comes from, and that's frequency. And all frequency carries information. And when their nervous system is oscillating in order, it begins to become entrained to that unified field, that quantum field, that invisible field of unifying energy that exists beyond your senses. There's no people there. There's no objects. There's no bodies there. There's no things. I looked it up. What existed before the Big Bang? Nothing. And that place where that emptiness is, it's rich in frequency. And now something amazing happens. When a person's dialed down the neocortex, the memory bank of the known self, what plugs them into three-dimensional reality, and their brain waves are in the very resonant state of theta, and they're in a hypnotic state, and the information is not coming through their senses from their environment, and they start tuning in, there's a connection that takes place. And all of a sudden, the nervous system starts interacting with energy and frequency, and the brain goes into these heightened states of gamma brainwave patterns, and the brain is aroused. And the arousal is not pain, and the arousal is not fear, and the arousal is not anger or aggression. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is connection. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling we'll ever have in our life. And that moment when that occurs and that autonomic nervous system is in high gamma, hundreds of standard deviations outside of normal, 3 standard deviations outside of normal is 2% of the population. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of standard deviations in gamma, coherent gamma, perfect coherent gamma. And those waves, as they interfere, start building bigger waves. And the brain starts moving into standing waves of energy. And that person now is getting a biological upgrade. And energy is informing matter. And there's the eczema, now it's gone. There's the blindness, now it's gone. There's the deafness, now it's gone. There's the stage 4 cancer metastasized to the bones, it's gone. There's the Parkinson's, now it's gone. Somehow there's a biological upgrade that takes place in the body. And literally they're interacting with that invisible field of energy. And we've just started to discover the different signposts, the different places, the resting points that the heart and the brain have to go to reach that elegant moment where we have that experience. That's the quantum. Now, this is what I noticed about that. Imagine having that moment and realizing it's not coming from any person, any object, anything. It's not coming from anything outside of you. Imagine that feeling of what people call pure love. I don't know, there's no word for it. Connection, bliss, whatever that is, wholeness, oneness. Imagine when a person realizes that it's not coming from anyone outside of them. They stop looking for it everywhere else, and that's when the love affair begins. And it gets really hard to miss a date. We take the blood of those people who hit that point. There's information in their blood that causes cancer cells to reduce in metabolic function by 70%. We take that blood, there's information in that blood, we subject it to Alzheimer's genes, it downregulates the genes for Alzheimer's. I know this is politically incorrect. We take the plasma of those people and we put a really nasty virus. We put that in the presence of the plasma of the people that run into that frequency, and the virus cannot enter the cell. It cannot enter. We isolated the protein in the plasma of advanced meditators who have this moment that actually will inhibit the spike protein from entering the cell. Imagine that. Producing a pharmacy of chemicals in your body that work better than any drug. A drug study, by the way, is about 25% causality. 25% cause and effect, 1 out of 4. That's usually a study that lasts 6 months, 3 months. The data that we study when we look at the blood of advanced meditators, 85 to 75% effective. That's 3 out of 4. And they're signaling the same genes, and they're making the same proteins. And that information is not coming from the diet. It's not coming from the drug. And I keep asking the scientists, where is that information coming from? Where are those chemicals coming from? Where is that information coming from in the blood that wasn't there at the beginning of 7 days? Your nervous system is the greatest pharmacist there ever was. And I can say that with such confidence now because I've seen the data.
So many of us have in this room had experiences many times in just sober waking consciousness through meditation, through breath work, through the various different modalities that can allow us to go within. You can experience a reality that is way more true, way more rich than anything with your eyes open. And when you taste that, when you touch that, you know that's a possible reality. You know that that place feels like pure possibility. You no longer, it's not as worthwhile to go to Mars, but to go on an expedition to the inner cosmos to see how deep you can go within the wells of your own being. When we have our eyes open, we're examining what's available to us with the visible light that we see, less than 1% of possible frequencies. When we start to tap in that place within us that is more vast, we start to explore this constant sea of invisible forces that are within us, that were always around us. The Wi-Fi that's around us through all the different various frequencies, we don't see, but they have an effect on us. So what then becomes possible when you start to explore those other 99% frequencies, and you're not just enamored, enchanted with the 1% physical phenomena that's arising and passing away in each moment?
Great question. Gosh, the probability that we see the truth of reality is 0. That's the mathematics. That's the mathematics. That's what the mathematics say. I looked it up. That we're perceiving less than 1% of reality, where we're witnessing a very small bandwidth of an electromagnetic spectrum that is the rainbow. And those different shades are bouncing off physical objects and giving us the illusion of separation, like a virtual reality experience. You're the character in the virtual reality experience, and we live in this reality, and because we have our senses and we're local in space and time, we're conscious that I'm this person separate from everybody else. And I have an identity. And The way you create in three-dimensional reality, of course, is you got to do something. And you got to go do something, and it takes time to get that thing done. So you have a thought like, I want a new house. And then your brain actually will calculate how long it's going to take you to pay off that house. And so the person has the thought of this new vision of what they want in their life. And then they have to move their body back and forth all the time to ultimately get that experience. And it takes time and energy. And so everything in three-dimensional reality that we create takes a lot of time and takes a lot of energy. I think that the divine lives in every human being. I think that we all came from oneness. We came from source. We came from singularity. We came from pure love. What do you want to call it? Pure consciousness, where there's no separation. The consciousness of everybody, of everyone, of everything, of everywhere, of every time. All the information that exists, past, present, and future, in that source. You're hanging out in source forever. You start thinking eternity. Is there anything else but oneness? What if there were many instead of one? And that's what created a separation from source. And we descended all the way down into density, fooled by our senses into the illusion of separation. And so now then, when we come down to this level, we have so much separation that we have the free will to create reality exactly the way we want. We took a piece of the divine with us. And we become so immersed in this less than 1% of reality, because where you place your attention is where you place your... So how much of your waking day do you put your attention on energy and frequency in?
Yo, brother, what's up? I think I was away from the computer when you were on earlier. F.A., you there, man? What you use for strategy? My strategy? Doing good, brother. How about you? My strategy? It varies, man. Horizontal structures, the main thing. Valuary rotations, psych levels. "15-minute opening range, trend lines, patterns. Appreciate you stopping by.
And how much of your waking day do you put your attention on matter and memories from the past and predictions of the future? But just because that, well, first of all, let me ask a question. How many people in this room believe in the quantum field? I'm just curious. Okay, so the thing with the quantum field, though, is that if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. If all of your attention is on the material world, it doesn't exist for you. It's there, but you're disconnected from it. You have no connection to it because you're unaware of it. Just like your nose. Your nose has always been there. The moment I ask you to become aware of it, it exists for you. The quantum field is the same way. It's this invisible field of energy that is the full spectrum of all frequencies. And as you get closer and closer to greater frequencies, there's greater levels of experience that we get to have that has nothing to do with this three-dimensional reality. So in this three-dimensional reality, it's called space-time.
HTF? No. Well, I don't know what that is, so I don't think so. Higher time frame? I do. So, like, I mean, to open up earlier in the day, you know, I went out and checked the daily just to see what was happening. That's where I ended up with this trend line. There's an orange trend line here. I mean, I'll glance at it, but when I'm day trading on the 2-minute, you know, I don't really pay too much attention to them. Just to look for things like retesting this double top or this trend line, not to really trade off of, but to have an idea that it's there. Let me see. I mean, I do it a lot in my swing trading. I'll go weekly, daily, 4 hour, 1 hour, but I do it a lot less on my day trading. So that orange trend line is the kind of daily 1 hour structure I was talking about. Not structure, but trend line through those highs. Yes, sir.
Time. And it's called space-time because it's got an infinite amount of space. I looked it up. Space is actually accelerating now. It's not just expanding. If we have infinite space, and we experience time by moving through space from one point of awareness to another point of awareness. Nothing wrong with that, but if you truly want to pass through the eye of the needle and enter that realm called the quantum field, you can't take your body. You can't take the character. You got to pass through the eye of the needle into that realm called time-space, that quantum, as pure consciousness. You gotta leave the identity, the character behind. And the moment the person becomes nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, and they can linger in that vacuum, in that emptiness, without a name, without a face, without a profession, without a past, without a disease. They can just hang out as pure consciousness. It is very fertile ground. Brain and the heart get highly organized. And all of a sudden, the rules change, because in the realm of time-space, the quantum, there's an infinite amount of time. Now, I know that's hard to imagine, but think about it like this. How many things could you get done if you had all the time in the world? I'm curious. How many? If you had all the time in the world, how many things could you get done? An infinite number of things equal to your imagination, yes? That's the quantum, but there's no objects, there's nothing physical. It's energy, it's frequency, it's vibration, it's information, it's consciousness, it's thought. And every thought in that realm has a frequency. So that when people begin to lay down the character in the virtual reality experience and become pure consciousness, they have to reframe their thinking once they enter that vacuum, and it takes practice to realize you're not your body. You think when you're there, there's you, and then there's not you. That's not even correct. There's no separation. And continuously surrendering some aspect of your limited self to join your greater self, to lose your sense of self to nothing, to dissolve into that infinite sea of blackness and become more of it and less of us. When we do that properly, we run into something really, really big, information. But the information, as I said, is not coming from this very small percentage of reality. It's coming from frequency that your nervous system's processing. There's a latent gland in the brain called the pineal gland that's a transducer. And a transducer is like a radio receiver. And every time we look at the scans of people who are connected, that part of the brain is on fire in their brain. That radio.
Bookmap, I looked into a little bit. Bid ask. Yeah, not so much, I guess. I mean, it's a lot of data at one time, maybe too much for me. And it really doesn't show me much more than the volume profile to begin with. And I don't hardly use this volume anyways. So, Bookmap, not worth the price. And like I said, it might be a little bit overload on data for me. I'm sure there's an advantage to it, but I think I'm more along the lines of easier, keep it simpler. And for me, that just overcomplicates it. I used to always have a DOM up, but I don't know. I've seen people use it. It's not for me. All the bid-ask numbers, I could never really pick up any patterns that helped me.
Receiver is switched on, and it's transducing frequency into very profound imagery in their brain, just like a TV antenna. And there's an upgrade that takes place in melatonin. Mystical chemicals. Melatonin is a function of light and lightness and darkness. Serotonin and melatonin are a circadian pattern that takes place brain chemistry-wise where? Here. In three-dimensional reality, when there's light, we make serotonin. When there's darkness, there's melatonin. But now the person's connecting to information, and it's not coming from their environment.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. If it were something, like you said, very low volume to where you really don't have the data on the candlesticks, I can imagine you really wouldn't have any other option than to look at bid, ask, and DOM. Because the candles, not like the NASDAQ right here where you're getting price action and the candles themselves are giving you indications for the direction. So if you were trading something low volume like that 10-year, you wouldn't have the candlesticks that you do on this because there's no volume. You'd probably have to use the DOM, bid, ask. Probably other lower volume futures. I mean, I'm sure there's a niche for it, but that's not something I would even consider because everything I do is off candlesticks. So if it didn't have enough volume to show me predictable candlesticks, I wouldn't want anything to do with it. Yeah, that's super scary, a 3 to 4 tick spread, especially something $10 a tick, you're just entering down 40, and then it's barely moving on top of that. So yeah, you'd probably be, I don't know, lucky to be scalping 40 to 80 bucks at a time. I mean, just an estimate, but yeah, that sounds a little sketchy. I like high volume. Everything's easier with high volume. $20 a tick? Oh, $20 a point, yeah. $50 a tick? Jesus. So are you saying you'd start in like down $200 just from the spread? Sounds awful. There's basically no spread on NASDAQ, you know, one tick. Man, that's not bad. I started bad with 2 bad trades. You're doing decent now. Can you read that by chance? Is that too small? Oh, I gotcha. Are you trading right now? Do you day trade? What do you trade? Is that the micro?
Environment, it's a frequency that's faster than the speed of light. It's quantum. Things are connected there. And when that person experiences that frequency, that connection, the pineal gland begins to manufacture chemicals that are derivatives of melatonin. Melatonin can't be melatonin any longer. It's interacting with a frequency that's different than light. And now melatonin makes really powerful antioxidants, anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory. Melatonin already causes you to relax. Now you are going to chill way out. It's going to turn into a benzodiazepine. You're going to make Valium, natural Valium in your brain. And Valium does what? Shuts the lights out in the amygdala. What's that? The survival center. No fear, no anxiety, no pain, no aggression, no anger, no frustration. Take that molecule and tweak it again. Melatonin already helps you to sleep. Ooh, now you're going to hibernate. Oh, first center, sexuality. Second center, appetite. Third center, preoccupation with the environment. The body goes into stasis. The body metabolically changes. We're discovering this. Take that molecule, tweak it again. You create the same chemical found in electric eels. And what do electric eels do? They amplify energy in their nervous system, and these high amounts of energy in the nervous system are very highly correlated with what we think those chemicals are. Take the molecule, tweak it again. Melatonin already causes you to dream, but this isn't a dream. All of a sudden, you make the most powerful hallucinogenic known to man, and all these 5 derivatives fit into the same receptor sites as serotonin and melatonin, but the brain is cranking with different information, and the person's having a full-on sensory experience without their senses. They're having, what is happening in that moment is more real than the trauma that they had 30 years ago. An experience enriches the brain. And the end product of an experience is an emotion, but this time the emotion isn't chemical. It's electric. It's an awakening. It's an arousal. It's a brainstorm. It's a moment of contact. It's a union. And that arousal causes the person to wake up in that dream, wake up in that reality, and there are an infinite number of those realities. No different than looking in a dressing room through 2 mirrors and you see an infinite number. There's infinite number of realities, and it's so important for us to realize that we're not linear beings living a linear life. We're dimensional beings living a dimensional life, and it just takes practice to activate that little gland in the back of your brain, and we work really hard on demystifying it. It has little crystals in it that when compressed, they begin to create a polarity in the crystals that create an electromagnetic field. There's the same passion that people have to be successful, to be an artist, to be an athlete, to be a musician, to be a business person, the same passion that they have in their life to achieve what they want. I want them to do that for themselves. Turn it in and have that be something that they really want to experience. And we've just been so lucky to capture brains in that moment. And people, I can't make the stories up. It's just impossible. The person is having a profound change, and when they come back to their senses, it becomes them and they become it in some bizarre way, and their spectrum of reality begins to broaden. They start to see what always existed, but they just didn't have the circuitry to perceive it until they had the upgrade, not from inside the virtual reality headset. They took the headset off. They got the upgrade from the information from the field. Anyway, that's the short story.
So you've said that the mind or the brain may think, but when you turn the heart into an instrument of perception, it knows. And I looked that up.
Did I say that?
The heart's electromagnetic field is 5,000 times greater of that than the brain. And so we can then use the mind and our brain to pinpoint the electrical charge we want, right? And then the heart can be the amplifier, the magnetic pull towards that for that reality. So I would love for you to speak into how when we find coherence, when we find alignment between brain and heart, then we can steward whatever reality we want to us in record time.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we when you're agitated at someone on a Zoom call, and you're doing and you're thinking about 5 ways to throttle them, I'm joking, but you get the idea. You're aroused by something that knocks you out of balance, and you're sitting there, your heart's beating against a closed system. It's pumping blood.
Yeah, traders I follow, really only Matt is probably the only one, Trades by Matt. That's who I started watching like recently within the past year that when I decided to start day trading again, which is why I have the volume profile similar to things he does, but strategy I don't think is the same. That's trades that I take. It's really just from getting back into it and doing it every day, figuring out what works and what doesn't. He's, I don't know. He is streaming. I mean, I've watched him within the past week. But he might be. I know last I was watching him, he was talking about a vacation up here to Michigan. So I don't know if he's not working then or whatever. But his style is probably closest to mine, which is why I watch him, scalp trading wise. More realistic, not to mention his personality. But who's the other one I watch? Or I don't really watch, I should say, is can't think of his name right now. Patrick Whelan. But he's so much freaking different from me than not to mention trading 15 contracts at a time. Yeah, he's crazy. Getting $6,000 a trade and shit. I mean, he's got it. You can't say that he's not good. He's a little bit probably too arrogant for my liking, but yeah, he's phenomenal at day trading. No doubt about that. A risk tolerance that I'll probably never have, ever. That's part of the reason why I like watching Matt. Lower, one contract, $300 to $600 a trade. Much more relevant to the way that I trade.
Blood, but you're not running, you're not fighting, you're not hiding, and it starts creating problems. The heart starts beating out of order, out of rhythm. And so we discovered when we started teaching people how to place their attention on their heart. Where you place your attention is where you place and out of all the things that you feel with, you know what I'm talking about with your body, we ask people to feel with nothing but their heart. And where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And we started hooking up the heart, the ECG monitors with the brain. And every time the heart would flux into coherence, you would see this wave of alpha, just this beautiful coherent wave of alpha. The heart was telling the brain, create. And alpha is the creative state. And when we're in alpha, we see in pictures, we see in images, we're imagining. When we're in beta, we're thinking, we're analyzing. It's the voice in your head. So we saw that when the person dropped into their heart really well, there was this kind of wave of information that went to the brain and caused the brain to become very coherent. And it was always after.
I don't know, man. This is the daily channel. Let me see if I can try and show it again. The thing is, I gotta friggin' remove all these pivot points. So that orange line is this trend line right here. I mean, it looks, I don't know. I don't think it's going up much higher than that, but who knows? It's anybody's guess. 4-day rally, 3-day rally. Look at this engulfing bar. Bearish engulfing, that's nasty. I mean, to me it looks like this is a consolidation of the down leg. I mean, I think, I'm just guessing, but if I had to guess, I'd say down leg. But because this is a daily chart, I mean, and I'm looking at an intraday 2-minute, this can easily rip up, rip down, just rip down, go sideways, rip either way. Looking at the daily, when I'm trading the 2-minute, they really don't have much in common. But if I had to guess, I'd say down. And that's that orange line, that's that trend line I was pointing out on the daily. Looks like you might have been right. I mean, so far you're right. better than me. I mean, it makes sense. Good consolidation. Like kind of a bull flag, this trend line here. Delta came in too hot on these two bars. But what worries me is that trend line we were talking about on the daily, kind of like it did here. Since it's on the daily, it's not real accurate. It rips up and then just hammers down. That's an unbelievable sell-off. I wouldn't be surprised if we did something similar, but anybody's guess. How many trades have you taken today? Nice, it's a good man, that's discipline.
I think that the divine lives in every human being. I think that. We all came from oneness, source. We came from singularity. We came from pure love, where there's no separation. Everybody in this room has done something great. And all they did was they decided on what that future was they wanted to live by, and they made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude... I think it's so important for people to remember that they're the creators of their lives instead of the victim of their lives, right? So the victim is saying, I'm feeling this way because that person or that circumstance, or I don't have any money, is causing me to feel this way. This is my relationship with money. What that really means is I'm using my lack to...
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
What is your thoughts around the identity of money and the psychology of how it plays in our lives? Because a lot of people want to make more, they want to attract more, but they're just struggling with just the concept of it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've been programmed quite a bit with our relationship with money. And we have a relationship with everything known in our environment. You have a relationship, a neurological network in your brain for your parents, for your cell phone, for your computer, where you live, where you've lived in the past, what you're going to do tomorrow. That, for the most part, the brain is a reflection of everything that we know, right? So along with that is our relationship with money. And I feel like I have a really good relationship with money because I work on having a really good relationship with everything in my life. Right?
Did you always have a good relationship with money?
I think so. I think so. I've never really lived in lack. That just wasn't part of it. Even when I went to college and I had to take out student loans and stuff, I always figured out a way to always be a little bit ahead of the curve. And so let's back up and just look at how people form beliefs. Because most beliefs are created from past experiences, right? So children, when they're in their early ages, their brainwaves are very slow. Like their brainwaves are in alpha when they're like 7 to 12. They're in theta when they're like 2 to 6 years old, and they're in delta like when they're newborn to 2 years old. And so these brainwave states are states that were really suggestible to information.
So when we hear information, we believe it.
And we accept it, we believe it, we surrender to it as if it's the truth without analyzing it, because there's no analytical facilities yet. Right. The analytical mind starts around 12 or so, 7 to 12, and that analytical mind is actually what creates a barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind.
So before 12, roughly, what we see, how we model our parents' behavior, what they say to us.
It's all being programmed subconsciously, right? And so that's really, really important, because if you heard money is the root of all evil, money is bad, only certain people are allowed to make money, you have to work hard to make money, this is how you got to do it. And that becomes the foundation subconsciously. Recording an audio file. You just keep recording that audio file, it becomes a subconscious program, right? So a lot of people have a relationship with money based on either what they've been told or what they've experienced in their outer environment, right? So then we gain information from our environment, and the stronger the emotion we feel from experiences in our lives, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a picture. And that snapshot is called the memory. So,
based on an emotion.
Based on an emotion. The emotion alters our internal state. So you're going along as Lewis, feeling really good, and all of a sudden you have this trauma, you have this crisis, you have this shock, and all of a sudden you have this dramatic change in your internal state, and your senses get heightened, and then you freeze the frame and you associate this internal state with whatever it is that's causing it, right? And that's how we create long-term memories, right? So
are painful memories more powerful, or beautiful memories more powerful?
They're both equal.
Okay.
They're both equal, but the problem is I think most people experience from more the negative emotions, right? And those negative emotions really are derived from the hormones of stress, right? So the alarm system, the emergency system, creates an arousal inwardly. And that arousal is saying there's something dangerous in your outer environment, right? And it could be a person, a circumstance, an accident, or whatever. And that change in emotional state causes you to remember the event. You got to pay attention, right? You got to stay really and narrow your focus on the cause. So think about people who have relationships with money, right, from the past. All beliefs are based on past experiences. So you have an experience where you lose money, you have an experience where money's taken away from you, you have an experience where you don't have enough, you're living in a place where there's not enough money, or a family that's not enough money. Then the emotion that most people are living by on a moment-to-moment basis is lack. Like, I'm in lack of having something that I want. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, because the experience changes your emotional state. You freeze the frame, you take a picture. The problem is, that's hardware. So we think neurologically within the circuits of that past experience,
Yes.
and we feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion, which would say, for example, be lack, right? So now the person says...
Before you go on to the next thing, what happens to the body and the mind when it is in an environment of lack? Mentally or physically, I'm in lack. What is the body and the mind saying?
Yeah, so the body is saying, I'm waiting for some external event to occur. I win the lottery. I marry the right guy. Whatever it is, that you're waiting for that event to occur. That experience produces an emotion. So the emotion then takes away the lack. And so when we play the game in three-dimensional reality, the creation game in three-dimensional reality, we experience separation from everyone or everything, because our senses fool us into the illusion, the hallucination of separation. I'm here and you're there. I'm here and the door is over there. So I'm aware that I'm here at one point of consciousness, and the door is over there, another point of consciousness. Okay, so in order for me to get from here to the door, I got to move my body and do something through space. I got to do something, and everything in this three-dimensional reality is going to take time and energy, right? So, okay, so then here's Lewis right here, and then he says, okay, I want this experience in my future, and your brain automatically predicts and projects how far in the future you think it's going to take.
Maybe it's a year, 5 years, 10 years.
30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Because that's what it's going to take to pay off that house, right? So now, one point of consciousness, I'm here. The other point of consciousness is where I'm placing my dream. So I'm separate from that experience. So then how do I get to that experience? In three-dimensional reality, you got to get up and you got to do something. You got to go to work. You got to drive to work. It takes energy. You got to fill your car with gas. You got to eat food. You got to work. All this stuff. You got to sleep. You got to recover if there's stress. And now people are, in a sense, waiting for the experience that's 10 years down the road or 30 years down the road to happen, to take away the lack of them not having it. And unfortunately, many times when the experience finally occurs, they can't enjoy it because they're too exhausted, right? So you play the game, you go to school, you study really hard, or you study on your own, you develop some skills, you make the right choices, you start saving money, you start learning from your mistakes, and then the game is how many things can you accumulate, and that accumulation then you associate with being wealthy or being abundant or being successful, right? And some people get really good at it, right? You can get really good at that. But for the most part, though, when we create from three-dimensional reality, we're creating from lack and separation. In other words, you're driving down the road and you see someone driving a car that all of a sudden you realize that you don't have. The moment you become aware that that person has that car and you don't have it, you're in lack of having it, right? So what the brain naturally does is it naturally creates you driving that car. And you have an image of yourself driving that car, and you start identifying, wow, that would be a greater experience for me to have. The problem is the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of actually happening for most people is the concept called time, right? Between cause and effect, right? So some people develop the ability to manage themselves and manage their life. They develop certain skills and they can pay for it and they can get it very quickly. The problem is when the novelty of that experience wears off, the car, and they're no longer identifying with that, and the feeling of emptiness and lack comes back.
They need to find something else.
They got to go and find something else. And so there's this game that goes on where you never have enough, right? And that's the lack game, right? So then if you think about people having the things they want in their life, when they create from lack and separation, it's the experience in three-dimensional reality that produces the emotion, and the emotion is saying, let's feel and experience this thing that you've been in lack and separation from, and that emotion then takes away the lack or separation. but you've worked really hard to get it, okay? Nothing wrong with that. Is there another way to do it?
Yes.
Okay, so the person who's living in lack is waiting for their wealth to feel abundant. They're waiting for their success to feel empowered. They're waiting for their healing to feel gratitude. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their mystical experience to feel awe. That's the Newtonian model of reality, of cause and effect. Waiting for that event to happen to take away this separation or lack. Nothing wrong with it. It's the way most people create. But what we've discovered is actually something else. The moment you feel gratitude, your healing begins. The moment you feel worthy and abundant, you're generating wealth. The moment you're empowered, you are moving towards your success. The moment you're in love with yourself and you're in love with life, you'll create an equal. The moment you are in awe of life, you're going to have a mystical experience. And so that's causing an effect, right? So then if you can teach people then how to create, instead of from lack or separation, but create from wholeness, and create from what we call the quantum field instead of three-dimensional reality.
What's the difference?
Okay, so the way first of all, it takes knowledge, okay? The quantum field is an invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it. It exists beyond our experience of three-dimensional reality.
Would this be in our mind's consciousness, or would this be in a different space?
Okay, let's look at that. So the answer to the question is, how much of your waking day do you put your attention on matter, on the material world, and how much of your waking day are you aware of energy and frequency? For most people, they're unaware of the quantum field. And if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. Right. Just like you have a nose, but if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. The moment you become aware of it, it exists. Well, the quantum field, you could study all kinds of science, and they'll tell you there is this invisible field of frequency and energy that exists beyond the senses that tend to connect everything physical and material. In fact, everything physical and material is connected to this field, okay? So how do you get there, right? How do you get there?
How do you get there?
How do you get there? So we discovered that when you take all of your attention off your body and you are not paying attention to your emotions, your drives, your habits, if you could take all of your attention off of every element in your environment, your cell phone, your tablet, your computer, your car, your whatever it is, your bed, take your attention away from everything, every place that you live, where you sleep, or you work, and you're not thinking about time. You're not thinking about your schedule, where you need to be, or what happened yesterday. You can relax into the present moment. There tends to be a dramatic change in the way the brain functions when people do this properly. We call it getting beyond yourself, but in a sense, you're dissociating from your three-dimensional reality. Why? Because if you're thinking about anything in your three-dimensional reality, that's where your attention is and that's where your energy is, okay? So we kind of figured out this formula when people really become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time. They're pretty much all of a sudden outside the constraints of the Newtonian world of got to do something to get an outcome. And if you can teach people how to linger there without a name, without a face, without a profession, without a family, without a culture, without a past, without a disease, you teach them how to be in this place we call the unknown, right? And you teach them that from that place, that invisible field, is where everything material comes from. And if they could create coherence in their brain, you need a strong signal in the brain. The more coherent the brain, the more stronger the signal.
What do you mean a strong signal?
Okay, let's see how I could say this. When most people, when we look at brains in real time, and we're looking at people's how their mind is working. When you're under stress, okay, stress is created by not being able to predict something that's going to happen in your life, the perception that something's going to get worse or you can't control something, right? So when that occurs, we switch on that primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system, and the brain goes into this very alarmed state called high beta. That means pay attention to the outer world. There's danger out there. But if it's not predator and it's traffic or your coworker or your ex,
Right.
this is where it gets to be a problem because it becomes very maladaptive, right? So when we're in that state and the brain is in that aroused state, we try to control and predict everything. So every person, every object, everything, every place, even your body has a neurological network in your brain, right? So as the arousal happens, we start shifting our attention to all these elements, and like a lightning storm in the clouds, the brain starts firing very, very incoherently. And when the brain's incoherent, we're incoherent. It's
So
just
that's not a strong signal.
That's not. It's a static on the wire. That's disconnection. There is no signal.
Right.
So when we're in that state, we're always really looking for the worst case scenario of what's going to happen, because if you prepare for the worst, anything less happens, a better chance of survival, right? So in this kind of aroused state, as we shift our attention to each one of these elements that are known in our environment, the brain starts compartmentalizing and firing out of order, and that is what creates what's called autonomic dysregulation. That causes the brain and body to get really out of balance, right? So in that state, we're over-focused. You know, when you're stressed, you're over-focused on something. You can't stop thinking about it. Our research shows that when you do that, you actually make your brain worse, because you're analyzing your problems within some disturbing emotion, and that emotion is driving you further out of balance. You're actually knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone, and you're driving it into these more aroused states, right?
For someone that's been living like that for decades, that's their base state. How do they even realize how to get out of that?
They don't. Usually it takes crisis, right? It takes trauma.
Extreme breakdown.
Yeah, breakdown.
A loss, a death,
all of
a
that.
breakup, a divorce, a near
bankruptcy, whatever it is, a disease, a diagnosis, whatever, something where you just can't go on business as usual. Now it's time to really start looking, right?
They have to wake up then.
Yeah. So let's get back to the concept of abundance here, because
you need a strong signal in this field.
Right. So then, if you can teach people to do the exact opposite, go from putting all of their attention on everything physical and material in the world of separation, and instead of narrowing their focus on something material, ask them to broaden their focus and put it on nothing. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but when you put your attention on space and you divert your attention, the act of sensing without thinking actually starts to slow the brainwaves down. Not only slow it down, but all of a sudden cause the brain to start reintegrating, starts to synchronize, right? And so you see different compartments of the brain that were firing out of order start to resonate. They start to communicate. They're all of a sudden synchronizing, and what syncs in the brain kind of links in the brain. So when a person has their whole entire brain firing in rhythm, that's a very strong signal that you can send out into the field.
So when that signal is strong in that position, what can you create from that space?
Okay, but that's only one element.
Okay.
So then the clear intention tends to be a very important element that we have to get down. And the more coherent the brain, the more clear the signal for that intention. So with intention and attention, we could actually make thought more real than anything else. Now, what is that? You're saying, what would it be like to be wealthy? What would it be like to be abundant? What would it be like to have all my needs met? What would it be like to have more than I need? What would I do if I had everything I ever wanted? The answer always is the same. You start giving stuff away. Because if an abundant person is truly abundant, why would they hold on? They would say, I'm not in lack. There's more for everybody, okay? Turns out, though, that the signal sent out isn't enough. You have to draw the experience back to you. And so
send the signal out to,
it's coherent brain,
financial freedom,
whatever
abundance, all these different things.
Right. Whatever that is for you.
You're putting that out there with your signal, with the intention and the attention.
Right.
And then how do you draw it to
so
you?
in
the physical world,
in the physical world, you got to go get it. You got to do something. This is the plane of demonstration. You got to go get it, and when you're in lack until it occurs, right?
But I'm hearing you say there's a way to not chase but attract.
All right. So if you're creating from the field instead of from matter, right? There's a very strong possibility that you'll shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it. And when there's a vibrational match between your energy and that future that you want to experience, Now, if you're creating from the field, you actually don't go anywhere to get it. You actually draw it to you. So here comes the synchronicities, the serendipities, the coincidences, the opportunities, and they come out of nowhere. And you say, I don't understand. I didn't do anything. Well, you changed your energy. And so then the other element is a coherent heart, right? And the heart has a magnetic signature. And the magnetic signature is what draws reality to us, right? So you combine that clear intention with a coherent brain. Now here's the key. This takes practice.
Yes.
Because the person who's living in lack is usually unworthy, is usually insecure, is usually in their past, they're usually frustrated, they're usually impatient, they're usually resentful, because nothing's changing out there because it's taking too long. Well, everything takes a lot of time when you do matter to matter, right? So then if you teach them, okay, we know all about that. We know the story behind that. We know what your parents told you about money, all that other, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But now let's do something that would be really cool. Let's write down the feelings of how you would feel if that future happened, and you're going to have to feel that feeling before it occurs. So now, okay, what does an abundant person feel? Pretty much free, a lot of freedom.
Peace, excited, joyful.
In love with life, grateful to be alive, abundant. Okay, now let's practice feeling those. Turns out when you're feeling those other emotions like resentment and impatience and frustration, you're stepping on the gas pedal, you're just turning on the sympathetic nervous system, and you're stepping on the brake. At the same time, which is you're angry, you're frustrated, but the fight or flight nervous system says run, fight, or hide, and you're sitting in a Zoom meeting and your neck is pulsating is because the heart is beating against the closed system, right? You're not using it in an adaptive way. So the heart starts firing out of order. It starts firing incoherently, and incoherent waves cancel each other out. It's called destructive interference, and then we stop trusting our future. Energy leaves the heart. Energy leaves the brain, energy leaves the heart, and you can't get in touch with the feeling of your future because in survival, which those are hormones of stress, all those emotions, in survival it's not a time to create, right? It's time to run, fight, and hide. Okay, so we gotta lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want. The habit of doing it that way for something greater to occur. Okay.
And what happens if we try to create from survival emotions?
It just takes a long time. You'll just force it.
Little steps at a time.
You'll force it. Yeah. You'll force it. You'll fight for it. You'll compete for it. You'll manipulate. You'll cheat. You'll lie. You'll do anything to get what you want because that's what matter does when it's trying to change matter. And everybody's playing that game, right? Everybody's trying to accumulate the most amount of things.
Right.
Okay, so that's what abundance means to certain people. Get as many things as you can. Okay. You want that? Not a problem. But let's learn the formula of how to create, right?
Yes.
So then you'd have to feel those emotions before the experience occurred. And if you understood that you could dissociate all of your attention from this three-dimensional reality and have no attention on anything known, and understand it's the field that creates matter, not matter that emits the field. And if you could get to that place and change your energy with a clear intention and elevated emotion, your heart starts beating in this beautiful rhythm like a drum. We've measured it so many times. And when that occurs, the next thing that happens, the heart informs the brain it's safe to create now. So the person relaxes into the present moment. And then we see this, like if you took a big sheet, and a blanket and you went like that, the energy of the heart actually informs the brain to move into these beautiful, elegant states of alpha brainwave patterns, coherent alpha. And that's saying, what's the next dream? What's the next opportunity you want to experience? That's a state of creation. So now you have a Wi-Fi signal. You got a coherent brain, that's a directive, that's a signal out, and you got this coherent heart. That's what draws it to us, right? You combine those two, and if there's a vibrational match between your energy and that potential in the quantum field, and you're feeling abundant, and whatever your brain associates with being abundant, that's your call. That's what the creative process is. This is the creative center. The brain frontal lobe actually says, what would it be like to be creative or abundant? I don't know what it'd be like to be abundant. Well, then go read a few books on people who actually became abundant and realized it wasn't a glorious process. They failed miserably. They got betrayed. They learned a lot of lessons, but they persevered. And what are the qualities of that person that you could embody? That's the key, right? Because it's not about wealth. It's who you become, right? Because people think it's about their wealth, but it's the becoming process. It's the overcoming.
That attracted that, right?
Of course. So then you got to turn the battleship around, because most people say, I can't feel grateful for my wealth because it hasn't happened yet. That's the hypnosis. Waiting for the experience to happen to feel grateful. Well, that's Newtonian, that's three-dimensional reality, that's cause and effect. The quantum, you got to feel it in order for you to experience it. Okay, so this heart becomes like an amplifier, and it sends that signal out, and that frequency can carry the thought of your abundance. Suffering cannot carry the thought of your abundance. Lack cannot carry the thought of your abundance. It's a different frequency, right? We feel different feelings like suffering. We think different thoughts, right? So people can say, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, all they want, but that thought is never making it to their body, because it's stopping at the brainstem, because the body's saying, I'm miserable, I'm unhappy, I'm in lack, right? So the affirmation doesn't work, right? Okay, so let's go one step further.
Yes.
So if you practice this, and you actually understood, well, we teach this pretty well, but if you learned it just like learning how to play handball, or learning how to hit a golf ball, learning how to dance a salsa, so you just practiced the form, you got really good at it. If you were doing it properly then, what would be the outcome? The experiment of being abundant would be that you would have to feel that feeling. Get so good at doing it with your eyes closed. You got to do it with your eyes open. Now, why? Because if you're feeling the feelings of your emotions, of your future, you're no longer looking for them.
Because you're in the future now.
Your body is so objective that it's believing it's living in that reality where you are abundant. And as long as you feel that emotion, you're not separate from it any longer. You're no longer in lack. You're no longer looking for it to occur. Say, why hasn't it happened yet? If you're feeling abundant, why would you look? Right? You wouldn't. So then, our job then is to be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body. So does that mean like you should check your bank account tomorrow and see if there's $500,000 in it? No. You keep tuning into that potential, and then here come the synchronicities.
Yes.
What's that? That's feedback in your environment. It's the universe saying, hey, Lewis, whatever you're doing, all of a sudden, we are starting to create, right? And I think it's so important for people to remember that they're the creators of their lives instead of the victim of their lives, right? So the victim is saying, I'm feeling this way because that person or that circumstance, or I don't have any money, is causing me to feel this way. That's my relationship with money. What that really means is I'm using my lack to reaffirm my dependency, my addiction, my conditioning. That's my relationship with money, is that I put my attention on money because I don't have it. So their relationship with money is, of course, built on lack. And so when they don't have it, they feel bad. And what they're really saying is, my outer environment, my reality is actually controlling the way I feel and the way I think. So, Lewis, why are you in a good mood today? Things are going good. Why are you in a bad mood? Things are going bad today. So this unconscious program of victimization is saying that we're allowing our environment to influence the way we feel and the way we think. Isn't that what victimization is? And the stronger the emotion we have to our lack, the more we put our attention on the fact that we don't have it, right?
Yes.
And so then the person has forgotten that they're creating reality, because what they're creating is lack. And they're creating more of it. And then they try harder, and they force harder, and they control
And they're more
more.
exhausted, and their body's tired.
And they're
their
breaking
mind's-
down, and, right. So the experiment then is, let's try it another way. Let's create from the field instead of from matter. Get a coherent heart, get a coherent brain, relax in the heart, and energy moves right into the brain. We've measured this 1,000 times. And all of a sudden, the person moves into these beautiful, elegant brainwave states where they're super creative, right? So the longer you're conscious of that energy, the more you draw that future to you. So then, what does the synchronicity mean? It means whatever you're doing inside of you is producing that effect outside of you. Pay attention to what you did.
Keep doing
and do
more
it
of it,
again.
yeah.
So generate a little bit more abundance. Just do it for an experiment. Now, when the synchronicity happens, do you think you feel suffering, or do you think you feel a little excitement? You feel inspired, right? So then that synchronicity is saying, use this energy, use this feeling. It should be easier for you to feel this now and go back and do it again. Keep the experiment going. And here comes the promotion. Here comes the email. Here comes the person you meet at the right time.
Yes.
Right? Whoa, we have something happening here, and then that becomes the momentum, right? So then we generate abundance. That's how we do it. And the relationship.
It doesn't just happen by accident. We generate it.
We generate abundance, right? So then, if you have an hour meditation where you're tuning into your abundant future, but then you're spending the other 15 hours a day in lack, don't expect anything to change. You defaulted. You're back to the old energy. And if you say it's that person or that circumstance or that bank account, I'm going to say you're back to the unconscious program of being a victim, right? So then let's go a step further. If your personality creates your personal reality, and it does, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, then the present personality who's listening to this podcast has created the present personal reality called their life. Nothing big there. Which means if you want to change your personal reality, you're going to have to change your personality.
Right.
Nothing changes in your life until you change, right? So then 95% of who we are is on autopilot, right? It's a programmed thoughts, hardwired thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, unconscious habits and behaviors, and really, really emotional responses that tend to be really knee-jerk and automatic, right? So if 95% of who we are is a set of unconscious programs, then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious thoughts. Now, people think when they sit down to do the work and make their change that they're doing something wrong. No, those thoughts have to come up. I'm not worthy, it's never going to work. But the person who's truly persevering towards their abundance realizes just because they have that thought doesn't mean it's true. They're curious on what's on the other side of that thought. Well, that's just the thought, right? And nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. So you keep moving past that thought, it has less and less power over you, right? Now you have power over it, or better yet, you're using your brain in the proper way instead of being a victim to your brain, right? If you complain about money, if you judge people who have it, if you rush when you're in lack, if you cheat when you don't have what you need, an abundant person doesn't do that. You got to look at that and say, I got to break these habits.
Yes.
Oh my God, if I truly want to be abundant, I can't act this way. Now here's the big one. If I truly want to be a new personality that's in a new personal reality, I can't take lack with me. I can't take unworthiness. I can't take the story that goes along with it with my parents or my grandparents or my ex or whatever. That story has to end, right? I mean, if not now, when, right?
How do people end those stories?
Well, of course. Well, how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering?
Right.
That's the game, right? That's the game called change. How many times do we have to go unconscious and default to that old personality when we catch ourselves and stop doing that and get conscious? That's the moment of change. So the problem is that most people wake up in the morning and they think, let me think of my problems, right? The brain is a record of the past, right? So they think about their problems. They don't have enough money, and those problems are usually connected to certain people at certain places with certain objects and certain things.
What didn't work out, or who screwed me over.
So the moment they wake up, the moment they remember those problems, they're thinking in the past. So now they're firing and wiring the memory. They're keeping the memory of the past alive in their mind. The problem is, every one of those memories has an emotion associated with it because we've experienced it. So when they feel the lack, when they feel the unhappiness, when they feel the anxiety, now the body's in the past. Thoughts being the language of the brain, feelings being the language of the body, how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. But the conditioning process starts because conditioning only needs a thought and a feeling, a memory or an image and an emotion, and a stimulus and a response, and you're conditioning your body to become the mind of that emotion. And now the memory's not in the brain. Now the memory's buried subconsciously in the body, and the body becomes the mind of that emotion. So the body is living in lack, and it's believing.
The body is that through the nervous system, or is that through
neurochemical,
the cells, everything?
So the body's so objective that it does not know the difference between the real life experience that's creating the lack and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone called lack. The body's believing it's living the same past experience every day. Why? Because the end product of an experience is an emotion. Well, if your life is changing, but you're still feeling lack, don't expect anything that you won't even see it. You'll walk right past it. You're viewing your life through the lens of the past. Okay, so then the person realizes that all their friends are making money and they're doing stuff, and they're like, wow, I'm really feeling lack now. So then, when it no longer becomes about your abundance, and it becomes about your change, that's a valuable moment. When it's no longer about your healing, but it's about your change. I paid attention to a lot of people in the last couple of years tell their story. The people who heal in this work from cancers and all kinds of chronic health conditions and Parkinson's and strokes and paralysis and all kinds of things, rare genetic disorders. It never was about, when they've really got in the game, it was never about their healing. It was about, what do I need to change in order to heal? When the game goes like that, so then the person who's feeling lack, on some level or another, it's not just in the mind, it's in the body, right?
So let me hear you say that again. When someone's looking for abundance, it's never about the abundance, it's about the change they need to make for healing?
No, I'm using healing as an example,
yes.
But let's use abundance as an example. When you understand that you cannot get abundant, when it's no longer about the game called abundance, it's about the game called change. What do I need to change? The more I change, the more I'll be abundant.
Yes.
So then it's no longer about how come it hasn't happened? That's the old personality, separate from the experience, still in lack, asking that question.
Which is creating your current reality.
Which is reaffirming it, because that's the lens you're perceiving it through. Okay, So
we should be focusing more on what we need to change every moment as opposed to the abundance or the healing.
Well, the word meditation means to become familiar with. Sit with yourself long enough and not turn on your cell phone, not scroll through your social media, and do no TikTok, no emails, none of that stuff. Don't just sit and close your eyes and watch the thoughts that come up. That's the exact reason why you're not abundant. Watch what you want to do when you're feeling lack, to take away the lack, and there's always something you would do to take it away. But sit with the lack and be curious on what's on the other side of it, right? Because the body's programmed into lack now subconsciously, right? So the emotion of lack drives our thoughts and drives our behaviors. So it makes sense then that if an emotion is a record of the past, then we're doing things habitually from the past. We're thinking in the past, right? So lower the volume to the emotion every time you notice lack comes up. And just like breaking any addiction, there's going to be cravings, right? So the body's going, hey, Lewis, it's been about 2 hours since
you're so used to doing this thing.
You've been thinking lacking thoughts about 150,000 times a day, and you're just going to stop now. The body's going to start influencing the mind and saying, it's not going to work. You're a loser. It didn't work before. It's too hard. Everybody else. That's
why it's so hard for people to lose weight or get in shape, because you might try it for a few days and then the cravings, or I'm tired and I want to go default back into the old personality.
Right, because why? Because the body, which has been conditioned, the mind, the body is the unconscious mind. So the body's got used to the familiar feeling. Even they don't even know it's lack. It's just how they feel. It's not guilt. So so let me finish. So the hardest part about all of this is making a different choice. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
It's going to feel unfamiliar. Your body's all of a sudden saying, hey, Lewis, why don't you start thinking those same exact thoughts, do the same things, make the same choices, demonstrate the same behaviors, have the same experiences, so you could feel that feeling of lack. Complain again to somebody, call somebody up and say how miserable your life is, right? And that's the known, right? So the body's always influencing the mind to return back to the familiar territory.
To the default.
The default, okay. All right, so now the person says, okay, what thoughts do I not want? What would an abundant person think this way? The people in our work that have created, I had a guy come to our event. I love this guy. He healed himself. He tried to take his life 3 times. When he told me that when he came to our work, he didn't have $2 to rub together. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars now. And he just keeps giving it away.
Wow.
His lesson His lesson was, no, it wasn't the wealth, it was who he became. So it's the overcoming process that is the becoming process. Right?
Who did he become in that journey?
Exactly. He had to get beyond all of those thoughts of his past, all the mistakes he made, all the things he did wrong, all the money he owed there, all of that. That was like, he just had to no longer be that person any longer. But he did say, how would a wealthy person live? And when he created his wealth, what do you think the first thing he did?
Started giving?
Giving it away. Why? Because an abundant person doesn't have any lack. And he knows how to create more of it. And he's in the experiment. Well, what would happen if I keep giving it away? He keeps getting more. That's a good experiment to have, because he is actually living in that abundant state. He also had tremendous healings taking place, because when you heal your heart, you heal your mind. I mean, it's just the way it is. We saw it so many times, right? So he healed his heart. He got an upgrade. He got an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
So then the next fundamental question is, how would an abundant person think? Write it down, dude, and fire and wire those thoughts in your brain and install the hardware. Keep doing it with attention and intention. It becomes the new voice in your head. It becomes a software program. Then say, okay, how am I going to be in my life today? What would an abundant person, how would they behave? And before you reach for your cell phone and start scrolling through your social media, close your eyes and rehearse in your mind how that person would walk, how they would breathe, how they would smile, how they would greet people, how they would be on Zoom calls, how would they be in traffic, how would they be at dinner. And the act of closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing the act, if you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. In fact, just a little bit of time, you start to install the neurological hardware to look like you already did it. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past, it's primed for the future. Keep doing it, keep rehearsing, no different than playing an instrument, no different than learning how to dance, no different than learning how to act or play a sport. Everybody's always rehearsing, right? The rehearsal process changes the brain to look like you've already done it, you've already experienced it. Now what's the essential part of that? The hardware is in place. Now all you gotta do is step into the footprint. Keep doing it, it becomes a software program. You start acting like an abundant person. Everything changes. Your energy changes, your mood changes, the way you walk, the way you breathe, your posture changes. You're out of the known, right?
Yes.
You gotta condition the body now emotionally into the future. Can't open your eyes in the morning until you are feeling worthy to receive. And if you can't feel worthy to receive, then if not now, when? If it takes you 2 hours to get there, ask me if it's worth 30 years of running, trying to get what you need matter to matter. Okay, so then the person who wrestles with their lack, they're out of the bleachers and they're on the playing field. Now, here's what we learned. Let's go back to beliefs now. So remember, a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again. A belief is something that you keep thinking enough times that you hardwired in your brain and it becomes an automatic program. And we have beliefs about all kinds of things, money, relationships, God, whatever it is. It's all based on what we've been told or our past experiences, right? The boundaries of those beliefs are our emotions, right? So let's just say you got betrayed or somebody abused you or your father told you that money was bad and there's never enough of it or whatever. That's a story, okay? But somehow it left an impression on you. Remember that event very clearly, and that's kind of rooted in who you are, right? Okay, so that emotion then is the boundary of our belief, okay? So how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. If you take a thought and a feeling, 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 that's called an attitude. A series of good thoughts with a series of good feelings, you say, I have a good attitude today. You have a series of negative thoughts that are connected to a series of negative feelings. You say, I have a bad attitude today. So attitudes are just shortened states of being. Good attitude in the morning, bad attitude in the afternoon. If you take an attitude, and you keep those up, and you string attitudes together, you create what's called a belief. And a belief is just an extended state of being. So if you keep thinking the same thought, you keep hardwiring it in the brain, you keep feeling the same feeling, you keep conditioning in your body, the redundancy of that cycle over and over again conditions the body to subconsciously become the mind of that belief. And all beliefs are subconscious states of being. Okay. take a belief, and you string them together, you form what's called a perception. And perceptions are just such extended states of being that we're unconscious. And so then we edit out reality. In fact, most people don't see things the way they are. They see things the way they are, right? And people are always filling in reality unconsciously based on their memory. They could be married to a person for 40 years and they don't see the person, they see the memory of the person, right? And there's research to prove this, okay? So how do we change a belief or perception about ourselves or our lives, okay? We've studied this. Okay, let's just say that lack is ingrained in there. You got the story, you lived on the streets, you lost everything, you got betrayed, your business partner took everything, took your wife, you got the story in the half, okay? Okay, you got to start telling a new story of the future, right? You got to believe in that future more than you have to believe in the past. So how do you do that? You only believe in the past when you feel the emotions of the past. The only time you're going to believe in the future is when you feel the emotions of the future, right? Okay? So in order for us to change a belief or perception about ourselves and our lives, we have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional conditioning in your body. And your body literally has to respond to your mind. That the choice that you're making to change in that moment becomes a moment in time that